Hello, hockey fans, and welcome to a new edition of Anatomy of a Season, the series where I take a given NHL team from a given season and show what led to the roster being built, going over the situation they're in, and go month by month, game by game, analyzing the season. So as I mentioned in my previous episode of Anatomy of a Season, that the three original six teams are celebrating their 100th anniversary in the 2025-26 season. The Rangers, the Red Wings, and the Blackhawks. I previously covered the New York Rangers and their fall from grace in the 1975-76 season, but it was a season of much needed change for them in regard to their future. So that leaves two teams left, the Wings and the Hawks. And indeed, the focus of this video is indeed the Chicago Blackhawks. And again, much like any team, especially with a history as long as theirs, you can choose just about anything, from great to good to mediocre to bad and awful. And they had a lot of those things, believe me. But I literally just went with a year at random. Yep, the 1984-85 Chicago Blackhawks. A lot of talent, but in need of a direction in a big way. At this point going into the season, they hadn't won a Stanley Cup since 1961. They since appeared in 4 finals, their last being in 1973. It looked as if the Blackhawks' revival might take place in the early 80s, especially with a huge 82-83 season that really showcased a lot of hope and some new talents as well as some familiar faces. After a setback in the 83-84 season, they entered this season shrouded in uncertainty. But obviously we'll get to all that. But now we begin with a backstory. On May 15, 1926, in Montreal, NHL owners met together and awarded a franchise to the city of Chicago, to a syndicate headed up by football star Huntington Hardwick from the city of Boston. However, the deal didn't last long. Hardwick, just a month later, would sell the team to decorated World War I American soldier and Chicago-born coffee tycoon Frederick McLaughlin. He was a commander of the 333rd Machine Gun Battalion of the 86th Infantry Division in World War I, which was nicknamed the Black Hawk Division, named after Black Hawk of the Sauk Nation, born in 1776, a Native American hero, a prominent historic figure in the Illinois region, who battled in the War of 1812 and the Black Hawk War of 1832. Thus, the Chicago Blackhawks were born. The Hawks were ready to go by the 1926-27 season in the Chicago Coliseum, which origins date all the way back to the 1860s. The first captain of the club was Dick Irvin, former Allen Cup champion in 1915, as their center. The legendary Babe Dye, formerly a Stanley Cup winner with the Toronto St. Patrick's in 1922, was also a key piece of the puzzle. Also, George Hay at left wing, who had success playing in Western Canada, and legendary member of the Vancouver Millionaires, Mickey McKay, who won a Stanley Cup in 1915. In the defense was Gord Fraser, who guided many character players on this core. Fraser was a big part of the 1925 Victoria Cougars, who won the Stanley Cup. In goal, 40-year-old Hugh Lehman, who was in goal for the Millionaires' Cup win in 1915. The NHL was actually 10 teams strong at this point, and the Hawks were put in the American Division, and despite a losing record, actually made the playoffs in their inaugural season, but in a 2-game total goals series, lost to the powerful Bruins despite putting up a good fight in the second game. For the next 2 seasons, they won 7 games each. They were truly awful, and actually not progressing quite as well as their expansion counterparts, the New York Rangers, who'd already played in a Stanley Cup final by 1929. But in the decade of the 1930s, things began to change for the much better. For one, they moved into the new Chicago Stadium Arena. In the early part of the decade, they obtained talent such as Johnny Gottslig, Frank Ingram, but in net, they had the great Chuck Gardner. He forever changed the fortune of the Hawks. They had a winning season in 1929-30 and returned to the playoffs, but when Dick Irvin took over as coach and led the way by Gardner, he led into the Stanley Cup final for the very first time in 1931, but they would, however, lose to the Montreal Canadiens. The following year, Gardner won the Vezina Trophy and they added defenseman Art Coulter, but the Hawks had a rough year following. But in 1933-34, at long last, they won the Stanley Cup, and I say at long last because, again, the Rangers had already had success, with smart coaching from Tommy Gorman, beating the Red Wings 3-1 in a best-of-5 series. However, Gardner was in terrible shape. He'd been suffering from a major tonsil problem over a year, and it was affecting his breathing. During the playoffs at one point, he had a fever of 102 to boot, but like a warrior, he did persevere. But the moment was bittersweet, as Gardner passed away due to a brain hemorrhage caused by the infection at just 29 years old, 2 months after his Stanley Cup win. It really left an emotional mark on the Hawks and their fans and the community, who were very passionate indeed about their team and very enthusiastic. Going forward the next couple seasons, there were changes that were kind of hard to roll with. They missed the playoffs in 1937, but the following season in 1938, under new head coach Bill Stewart, forward Paul Thompson, and star defenseman Earl Seabair, despite a pretty bad season and a losing record, they pulled off probably the greatest miracle run in the history of the Stanley Cup, stunning the heavily favored Toronto Maple Leafs. The Hawks just seemed to be an enigma in their short history, dealt bad hands, yet still came into the 1930s with 2 Stanley Cups despite finishing dead last a year after their championship win. The 1940s saw the Blackhawks be the only Original Six team not to win a Stanley Cup in that decade. They made the playoffs in 3 straight seasons to start it, but they did have a couple bright spots to boot. And they were mainly brothers, Max and Doug Bentley. In 1944, they led an upstart Chicago team to the Stanley Cup final, but were dominated by Rocket Richard and the Habs. The Hawks just couldn't stay consistent. They missed the playoffs the following year, but then Max won the scoring title and the Hart Trophy as league MVP. This was, of course, the time the Norris family took over as owners, and they were just too busy with backdoor dealings lining their pockets rather than making their team better. And it showed. Despite the fact that they lost Max Bentley to Toronto, they'd gotten star defenseman Bill Gadsby. The Hawks, however, missed the playoffs for 6 straight seasons and were considered as the laughingstock of the NHL, despite Doug Bentley playing pretty well. But he retired after 1952, and they also Billy Mosienko set an NHL record back on March 23, 1952 that still stands as of the recording of this video in early 2026. 3 goals in 21 seconds, the fastest hat trick in NHL history. The Hawks finally did return to the playoffs in 1953 and even took eventual Cup champion the Habs to the limit, but lost in the 7th game. It was short-lived joy as their best players were getting older. Gadsby was soon traded to the Rangers, and they missed the playoffs the next 5 straight seasons. There just seemed to be no end to their misery in sight. The Norrises clearly didn't care, only acquiring Red Wings icon Sid Abel, who was way past his prime, and Ted Lindsay, who was only dealt to the Hawks as a punishment for trying to start a union. Hawks fan devotion was still there. The city of Chicago was one of the best sports towns in the world. Little did they know, however, salvation was finally on the way. Nobody knew when defenseman out of Kenagami, Quebec, Pierre Pilote, joined the team in 1956-57 that he'd make the difference that he would. In the 1957-58 season, the Hawks acquired goaltender Glenn Hall, who had already done very well and been an all-star in Detroit for 3 seasons. That same season, a rookie by the name of Bobby Hull joined the roster. The Hawks slipped into the playoffs in 1958-59, but were beaten by the Habs in the 6th despite a great effort. And then joining their roster full-time in the 1959-60 season, a gritty and heart-filled centerman by the name of Stan Mikita. They made the playoffs again, home on the scoring title, but the Habs beat them again. But at last, at least there seemed to be direction. Rudy Pilos was the head coach, and Tommy Ivan was a tremendous general manager, and he led the way. Then in the 1960-61 season, something shocking happened. The Chicago Blackhawks stunned the Montreal Canadiens in the playoffs, with the 5-time defending Stanley Cup champions finally beating them in 6 games. They went on to beat Gordie Howe, Alex Delvecchio, Terry Sawchuk, and the Detroit Red Wings in 6 games to win their first Stanley Cup in 23 years, since 1938, and they had the league's longest active slump at the time. Many thought the first true Hawks dynasty was about to come to fruition at last, and in the 1961-62 season, it seemed that might be the case. They had another excellent year. Hull won his 2nd scoring title. Makito was the first-team All-Star. Pilote and Hall were second-team All-Stars, and they made it to the Stanley Cup, but would lose in 6 games to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Hawks' popularity, however, was at an all-time high. The excitement of this team had fans packing Chicago Stadium. Things continued to look good, but they wouldn't regain the cup in 63. They had the 2nd best record in the league. Pilote won the Norris Trophy as top defenseman. Hall won the Vezina. They had the 2nd best record again in 64, but were upset by the Wings for the 2nd straight season. Pilote again won the Norris. Makita won his first scoring title. At this point, Billy Ray had taken over as the team's head coach. In the 1964-65 season, they finished 3rd, but they were the ones to upset the powerful Red Wings squad and made it back to the Stanley Cup final. And despite a very exciting final, the Montreal Canadiens, however, would beat them in 7 games. However, Pilote won another Norris Trophy. Hull finally won the Hart Trophy as league MVP, as well as the Lady Byng for excellence in sportsmanship. Makita took the scoring title again. The Hawks had an excellent year in 66. 2nd best record. Hull took home 3rd scoring title. 2nd straight MVP. But the Wings got them in 6 games. And this would be around the time that Bill Wirtz became associated with the team. In the 1966-67 season, however, the Hawks dominated the NHL regular season. 94 points. Their best season ever. And one of the best seasons in NHL history among any team. Stan Mikita is the NHL's first ever Triple Crown winner, and to date, the only. Art Ross Trophy as the league scoring champion, his first Hart Trophy as league MVP, and the Lady Byng for excellence in sportsmanship. Hall shared the Vezina with backup Dennis DeJordy. It'd be a crime if this team doesn't win a cup. And it's grand theft, as they don't. An aging Toronto Maple Leafs team upset them in 6 games before going on to win the Stanley Cup. This was heartbreaking for the Hawks and their fans. True devastation. Expansion was about to hit the league. 6 new teams arrived, and the Hawks lost Glenn Hall to the Blues. They had a good 1967-68 season. Mikita won his second straight Triple Crown. Hull still played well, but despite beating the Rangers in 6 in a new 3-round format, eventual champions the Habs beat them in the semis in 5. They also lost Pilote to the Leafs in the offseason. The Hawks only finished 1 game above 500 in a very disappointing 68-69 season and missed the playoffs for the first time since 1958 after 10 straight appearances. But make no mistake about it, the fandom of this team is still among the best of the league. Chicago Stadium is always rocking with their passionate fans and devotion. And going into the 1970s, things were still looking good despite that setback season. Hall and Mikita were hitting their early 30s, but were still among the best players in the league. But they really needed a new goalie. So leading the way into 1969-70 was rookie goaltender Tony Esposito. That's right, he had some NHL experience as a third-string goaltender in Montreal. And the Hawks rebounded huge from their disappointing season. So huge, in fact, they broke their own record for best regular season with 99 points. Best record in the league, and the man they call Tony Owen Net won the NHL's Calder Trophy as the league's top rookie, and also took home the Vezina. Mikita was in top 10 in scoring. Bobby Hull missed 17 games due to injury, but was still productive. And Pat Stapleton was emerging as a defenseman, and they acquired Bill White to give the blue line more depth, and they had a nasty customer in rookie Keith Magnuson. They swept out a revamped Red Wings team in the first round, but the powerful Bruins, who were on equal footing, did sweep them out on the way to their Stanley Cup victory. Once again, hopes were sunk. The following year, however, the Hawks had 107 points. Hull had a huge season, as the league was continuing to grow, now 14 teams strong. They swept out the upstart Flyers in 4 straight, and it took a grueling 7 games to take out a very tough New York Rangers squad, who was pretty much every bit as good as they were in a lot of ways. They were back in the Stanley Cup Finals for the first time since 1965, and awaiting them were a very good, yet not overly consistent in many ways, Montreal Canadiens club, who weren't used to being the underdogs. It went to a 7th game. The Hawks lost a heartbreaker 3-2 despite leading 2-0, again falling short of the Holy Grail. They had another 107-point season the following year. Bobby Hull had 50 goals. Tony O shared the Vezina with Gary Smith, but after sweeping out underdog Pittsburgh, they in turn were swept out by the Rangers. But something happened in the offseason. Bill Wirtz, who'd been the team president since 1966 and was on to a best start in his reputation, he took over as sole owner in 1972, and due to his cheap pockets, let Bobby Hull literally slip through his fingers without any real effort to keep him. He went to the rival league, WHA, and signed a blockbuster deal with the Winnipeg Jets. Some even blame Wirtz for losing Phil Esposito years earlier, Tony's brother, of course, who had become a megastar in Boston and won 2 Stanley Cups. Then Dollar Bill, as his cheap ass would have become known as, felt it was unfair to season ticket holders to have home games broadcast locally on TV and canceled any deals and blocking games out. Needless to say, it was pointless, as Chicago Stadium had little trouble drawing fans, but regardless, the Hawks still had a very good 72-73 season, and again, winning their division. Jim Pappen had a big year for the Hawks, and they beat the Blues and Rangers in 5 games, and were back in the Stanley Cup Final, but lost a high-scoring series to the favored Habs in 6 games. In that year of the draft, they took Darcy Rhoda, who wasn't a bad player per se, but they passed up on another winger in Rick Middleton. Pat Stapleton also defected to WHA. The Hawks, again, were still roaring in the 73-74 season, 105 points, beating the Kings in 5 games, but losing to the first-place overall Bruins in 6. Tony O, however, took home his 3rd Vezina trophy, sharing with Flyers goaltender Bernie Perron. In the draft that year, the Hawks didn't make much of a splash, at least in the early round, but they did make a very good pick in the 3rd round. At 52nd overall, they took Bob Murray, a defenseman from the Cornwall Royals of the Quebec Major Junior League. Murray was a fair bit overlooked due to his size, 5'10", 180 pounds. However, in 3 seasons with the Royals, he amassed 46 goals, 151 assists for 197 points in 157 games. Very impressive. And he helped lead his team to the league championship in 1972, and that year the Royals won the Memorial Cup, its best junior team in all of Canada. That same year, he was named the Quebec League Rookie of the Year. He's coming off a fantastic season with 23 goals, 76 assists for 99 points in 63 games. He's also named a first-team All-Star. Murray was tremendous at positioning, could get physical when needed, and strong along the boards and near the net. The Hawks continued to move forward, but it was more like they were kind of just strolling along. They had a decent season, I guess, in 74-75. Makita was actually still producing at a high level, and decent input from Pip Martin, Jim Pappin, and Cliff Coral. However, injuries to White and Magnuson affected their defense. However, Phil Russell did step up a bit. Antonio was doing all he could in net. And they did beat and upset the Bruins in a best-of-3 preliminary round series, only to be bounced by 5 against the powerful Sabres. The Hawks finished first in their division in 1975-76 season again, just despite being just 2 games above 500, as the NHL at this point was now 18 teams strong. However, Makita missed 32 games as the downward trajectory of his career sadly began. However, Bob Murray, after a good year in the CHL, was actually made a full-time member of the Hawks roster and joined Phil Russell and Magnuson on a strong defensive core. Dennis Hall and Pip Martin played well enough, but the Hawks were throttled by eventual champions Montreal in 4 straight. Bill White also retired at the end of the season, but hey, great news! They acquired Bobby Orr! Dollar bill finally pays off. Bad news, Orr's knees are shot to shit and he just plays 20 games. Yet still led the team in plus-minus. Crazy. Hawks had a terrible season, however, that year in 76-77, their first losing season since 1960. Yet somehow slipped into the playoffs. Yeah. But were slipped out in 2 straight by the powerful and growing New York Islanders. Teams were passing Chicago by. It was very much evident at this point. Wirtz was clueless in many ways, and people noticed. Yeah, okay, the arena was full, and that's probably the most important thing. But the upkeep of the actual arena itself was called into question. Also, the team just seemed to lose its community feel, as Wirtz's approach to ownership wasn't very outgoing in many ways, much like other owners around the league. Also, to boot, the Hawks were now consistently one of the lowest scoring teams in the league. Billy Ray was actually fired as head coach 34 games into the season after spending 14 seasons as the bench boss. More change, however, was on the way. Tommy Ivan was soon to be replaced as general manager after 23 years. As he'll take on a different role with the team, staying with the organization. But in the 1977 NHL draft, he gave his team one last gift. 6 overall in the first round, the Blackhawks took defenseman from the Ottawa 67's Doug Wilson. A scoring defenseman with a booming slap shot, great passing skills, superb at starting a rush, and also effective at defending in his own zone and works the neutral zone pretty well too. During 3 seasons in Ottawa, he scored 80 goals, 174 assists for 254 points in 156 games. Remarkable. In his final season, he scored 25 goals, 54 assists for 79 points in 43 games. He led the 67s both to an OHA championship and an appearance in the Memorial Cup, where he played very well. Wilson will be joining the league this season. When another pick was made in the 6th round, 96 overall, the Hawks took Jack O'Callahan, another defenseman, he being from Boston University. We won't be seeing him until a bit later on, but at 6'2" and a solid 190 pounds and a bit of a nasty customer, he can lend substance to the core potentially in the future. But now we introduce you to the new general manager and head coach. And that would be the man they called Pulley, Bob Pulford. He was a tremendous hockey player, a quintessential two-way forward who's played 15 NHL seasons, all of but 2 were with the Toronto Maple Leafs, where he collected 4 Stanley Cup rings as a huge part of their winning teams in the 60s. He took a job immediately after retirement as head coach of the LA Kings, and he definitely turned around that stagnant and directionless club, easy for me to say, and turned them around in many ways, especially with a huge 1974-75 season where they had their best season in their short history by far. As a result, Pulley was named Coach of the Year, winning the Jack Adams Award. His overall record in 5 seasons with the Kings was 178 wins, 150 losses, and 68 ties. Pulford wasn't for wasting time. On November 4, 1977, he traded Pip Martin to the Vancouver Canucks for future considerations. Fans, of course, were skeptical of this, as Martin was well-liked, but wasn't really producing at a level necessary for this team to improve. But future considerations? Sometimes that can mean literally nothing. But that won't be the case here, but we'll get to that in a few years. The Hawks did show some improvement in the 77-78 season. They won their division with a passable record. Tony Esposito had a pretty resurgent season in net. Ivan Boldarev was their top scorer, and Doug Wilson had a really good rookie year, and Bob Murray was evolving nicely. Hawks, however, were swept out in 4 straight by the powerful Bruins. Pulford was a finalist for Coach of the Year. Pulford kept busy trying to build his team into something better as the 1978 draft arrived. And in the 3rd round, 46 overall, they picked from the Cornwall Royals forward Rick Patterson. Solid speed, quickness, nice release, and was solid in the face-off circle, can drive to the net, but again was overlooked due to his actual size. In 5 seasons, he scored 128 goals, 237 assists for 365 points in 342 games. His final season was huge, 58 goals, 80 assists for 138 points in 71 games. But all the way in the 11th round, the Hawks made quite the pick. 179th overall, they took Viking Alberta native Daryl Sutter. Indeed, the second Sutter brother of the Sutter dynasty to enter the NHL, much like his siblings, a warrior on ice with great leadership skills, defensive forward who can cover and check elite scores, and an efficient penalty killer to boot. After 3 seasons with the Red Deer Rustlers of the Alberta Junior League, he made it to Lethbridge Broncos of the WCHL and scored 33 goals, 48 assists for 81 points in 68 games. But he won't be joining the team until a little bit later. But the 1978-79 season was another setback. They finished 29, 36, and 15. But being in a shitty division helped because they still finished first. But were swept out fairly easily by the first place overall New York Islanders in the playoffs. The consistent mediocrity of the past 5 seasons was frustrating to fans, not to mention the disconnect that Wirtz had caused among them. And still had very little goals. What a solid defense. But still among the worst scoring teams in the league. And also, you have one of the best goalies of all time in net. But I'll jump in the gun slightly, as at deadline time of the 78-79 season, the Hawks made a monster trade. Indeed, on March 13, 1979, the Chicago Blackhawks parted ways with their top scorer, Ivan Boldarev, along with forward Darcy Rhoda and defenseman Phil Russell to the Atlanta Flames, in exchange for sizable defenseman Greg Fox, towering winger Harold Filippov, 2 more big men on defense, Pat Ribble and Miles Zaharko, and big man forward Tom Lasiak. It's clear Pulford wanted to add size to his team. As for Fox, Filippov, Ribble, and Zaharko, they played a combined 455 games for the Hawks. 339 of those were from Fox. But they're not really part of our story. However, Tom Lasiak, on the other hand, is. A 2nd overall pick from the Atlanta Flames in 1973, a swift skater, an excellent puck passer, and a solid checker, and excellent in the face-off circle to boot, can work the boards very heavily and aggressively. He is a forward for just about any situation you need him in, and during 6 seasons, he was a very popular fan favorite with the Flames, has been a rock-solid 155 goals, 276 assists for 431 points in 445 games, and a plus 27. He represented the Flames in 3 NHL All-Star games. Before the trade in 1978-79, he was playing really well that year. He had 23 goals, 35 assists for 58 points in 52 games, and was a very good plus 19. Going into the 1979-80 season, the NHL was set to expand to 21 teams, as at this point, the Cleveland Barons had folded. But now, the WHA is merging 4 teams with the NHL. Winnipeg Jets, Hartford Whalers, Quebec Nordiques, and Edmonton Oilers. Everything in the entire league was being shaken up huge, which all led to the 1979 NHL draft, which took place on August 9th, being much later in the summer than usual due to all the hoopla. The Hawks had the 7th overall pick, and Pulford was thinking defense. Okay. And this draft had plenty of them. Now, even though Rob Ramage and Greg Hartsburg were already taken, let's look at who's available still. Oh, Ray Bork. Okay. Jay Wells. No, not too bad. Mike Ramsey. Paul Reinhart. Kevin Lowe. Keith Brown. And Brad McCrimmon. These are all excellent prospects, as you probably already tell. This is a tough decision for Chicago to make. And they want size and physicality and a bit of a stay-at-home style. So they go with Keith Brown. Okay, listen, I'm not insulting this pick. After all, spoiler, he would actually go on to have a really solid career and play many games in the NHL for many seasons. But they already had an offensive defenseman in Doug Wilson's, and I know that you're probably thinking it's easy with the benefit of hindsight to say this, and hey, it's fun too. Kevin Lowe and Mike Ramsey might have been better options in that regard, but either way, this is not a bad pick whatsoever. Keith Brown is a very good pick. 22 goals, 138 assists, 160 points in 144 games with the Portland Winterhawks of the Western League. Aggressive hitter, works really hard in front of the net, can frustrate top-level forwards. He's also a solid passer and great at surveying a situation. In 1978, he was the 2nd-team All-Star for the Western League, and his final year was named 1st-team All-Star, so it's easy to see why the Blackhawks picked him up. He's coming off a season with 11 goals, 85 assists for 96 points in 70 games. So yes, his scoring touch is not too bad, but his role in Chicago will be a little different. In the third round and 49th overall, they took Peterborough Pete's center Bill Gardner, a swift playmaker with smooth scoring abilities. In 2 seasons, he notched 56 goals, 103 assists for 159 points in 133 games. He helped lead the Petes to back-to-back Ontario League Championship wins, making it as a finalist for the Memorial Cup in 78 and winning it in 79. Coming off a season where he scored 33 goals, 71 assists for 104 points in 68 games. He will, however, be spending another year in junior. The 1979-80 season saw new head coach Eddie Johnston took over, as Pulford was just going to remain focused on his general manager duties. They had a really good season, 34, 27, and 19, much improved, finishing first in their division. However, with the new playoff format, they're 7th overall and 7th seeded, and actually managed to win a playoff series, sweeping the underdog St. Louis Blues in 3 straight. But were swept out in the next round, 4 straight by the mighty powerhouse Buffalo Sabres, led by coach Scotty Bowman. There were some bittersweet moments, however, this season, as Keith Magnuson was overcome by injuries and ultimately retired after toughing through just 3 games. And one of the biggest icons in the history of the team, and maybe even perhaps in the NHL at this point, Stan Mikita, also had his career end due to mounting injuries, only played 17 games. But many bright notes. Tony Esposito had one of the best seasons of his entire illustrious career and was named a first-team All-Star for the first time in years. The Hawks had decent forwards such as team captain Terry Ruskowski coming in for the WHA, Grant Mulvey, Rich Preston, and Tom Lasiak is playing very well. Keith Brown had a solid rookie season. Doug Wilson and Bob Murray are coming along pretty good. But the fact was, they were still the 3rd worst scoring team in the league. They need goals. Pulford can't ignore this any longer. However, with the upcoming 1980 NHL draft, it's going to be a game changer for the Blackhawks. While the 1979 draft was truly one for the ages and a game changer for the entire NHL, the 1980 draft was grabbing its fair share of headlines as well, as 3 players were all the rage across the board. Regina Pat star center Doug Wickenheiser, who shattered Western League scoring records, led his team to the WHL championship title and a Memorial Cup appearance. On the other end of the country, playing for the Montreal Juniors, with 181 points, league MVP and first-team All-Star Denis Savard. And the man who everyone seems to forget while telling this story, Dave Babich, defenseman for the WHL's Portland Winterhawks, who was touted as the top choice among blue liners by analysts across the league. The first overall pick belongs to the Montreal Canadiens, who got this pick thanks to the foresight of now retired general manager, the great Sam Pollock, who knew the Colorado Rockies would still suck at this point. He made a deal all the way back in September of '76 that got them this pick. The Jets, well, they just plain suck, so they got the 2nd pick. And this is where our boy Pulley made a good deal. Back in the 1979 draft, he made a deal with the Quebec Nordiques. Réal Cloutier, whose NHL rights belonged to the Hawks, who drafted him originally, but opted to play for the Nords in the WHA. The deal was that the Hawks don't claim him in the reclamation draft, so they got this pick. Even though the Habs didn't make it known, speculation by most obviously was that they're going to go for Savard, the native of Gatineau, Quebec, who grew up a Habs fan, and in the grand traditions of the team, he'd be a lock to be the next future star center for the Canadiens. And the fans waited with bated breath, and they wanted him there as well. The rumor out of the Jets camp was that they wanted Babich, and we're looking at a defenseman who can change their fortunes, but they weren't exactly saying no to whichever forward was available after the first pick. Pulford was fully content, however, on Wickenheiser, if the Habs very well take Savard. But with 2 picks in this draft, they're also going to be looking for a defenseman later on. So the day arrived, June 11, 1980. The first draft to be held at the Montreal Forum. And the Habs, well, were ready once the proceedings began. They didn't waste any time, really. Pick was announced, and the Montreal media gasped when the name Doug Wickenheiser was read. The room was scattered with noise and rumblings talking about what had just happened, but it didn't distract the Jets any, and they indeed took Dave Babich. And now it was the Chicago Blackhawks' turn, and they indeed know a top-scoring forward should be their top priority at long last. And they indeed take Denis Savard as the 3rd overall pick. This is everything the Hawks need in a playmaking center going forward. And while of course Pulford was concerned about his size, He's really getting a marquee player here. A natural skill, a true highlight reel maker, one-of-a-kind stick handling, high-end playmaker who can read ahead of time what's going to happen. Superb passes and setups. He can improvise in any given situation. Tremendous agility, highly competitive, and a leader by example. Oh yeah, and of course his numbers are very good, as I alluded to earlier. In 3 seasons with the Montreal Juniors, 146 goals, 309 assists, 455 points in 214 games. That's 2.12 points per game. And again, as I previously mentioned, first team All-Star in his final season, league MVP. He was also the Rookie of the Year back in 1978. And look at this final season. Once again, 63 goals, 118 assists for 181 points, 72 games. That's 2.5 points per game. Now, even though Stan Mikita's game had declined before his retirement, Savard still faces pressure of that top prospect mantle and carrying the torch forward as the top center. The draft continued, and of course, they had another pick at 15th overall, and are looking again to add more strength to their defense. As you can see with this chart, 2 future Hall of Fame defensemen, Larry Murphy and Paul Coffey, were taken. And to be fair, the only choices at this point, really, that would, setting on his radar was Mike Studders and Greg Muni, both from Kingston, and Mo Mantha and Jerry Dupont from the Marlies. And they take Jerry Dupont from the Toronto Marlboros of the OHA. Once again, Pulford zeroed in on size. 6 foot in the neighborhood of 200 pounds. Traditional hard-hitting stay-at-home style that can make anyone pay a price from getting into his team's zone. In 2 seasons, he's played 135 games, scored 70 points, and has 137 penalty minutes. It'll be a bit, however, until he joins the team. The Hawks, however, continued through this huge draft. And in the second round, 28th overall, they take forward Steve Ludzik from the Niagara Falls Flyers. A skilled centerman with 75 goals, 141 assists for 216 points in 135 games. It's quite the scrapper with 240 penalty minutes. He is coming off a season with 43 goals, 76 assists for 119 points and 138 penalty minutes. He'll be spending 1 more year in juniors. But in the third round, the Hawks make a steal. 57th overall, they take Troy Murray of the St. Albert Saints of the Alberta Junior League. A full 2-way player with exceptional defensive skills, really strategic in the face-off circle, and he could fight forwards for pucks and didn't back down from anyone. Excellent cutting off passes from the opposition and supporting the Blue Liners. But clearly, he knew about offense as well. In 2 seasons, he had 86 goals, 94 assists for 180 points and 192 penalty minutes. And coming off a season with 53 goals, 47 assists for 100 points and 101 penalty minutes in 60 games. He has committed to Howard to play at the University of North Dakota, but in the 6th round, the Hawks made an even bigger steal. 120th overall, winger Steve Larmer from the Niagara Falls Flyers. After beating his first seasons in the Ontario League with the Peterborough Petes, he went to Niagara and continued to look sharp. Overall, he has totaled 106 goals, 133 assists for 239 points in 195 games. A hard back checker, the defensive upside, is solid on penalty kills, highly skilled offensively with great anticipation near the net, and had a nice release, and can work well with his centerman. He won an Ontario League championship in 1978 with the Petes, and played in the Memorial Cup, and the very next year the Flyers made it to the league finals. His most recent season, he scored 45 goals, 69 assists for 114 points in just 67 games. He'll be spending 1 more season with the Flyers. Oh yes, Pulley did very well in this draft, but there's also a new addition. You remember the Pitt Martin trade in 1977 to the Canucks for future considerations? Well, these future considerations actually ended up being something, and that was goaltender Murray Bannerman, who only has 20 minutes of NHL experience with the Canucks. He has spent the last 2 seasons, however, playing for the AHL's New Brunswick Hawks, and has amassed a record of 54, 34, and 10. Not bad at all. Goals against average of 3.45, save percentage of an okay 8.78, and 3 shutouts. He's coming off a really good season, however, with a 32, 20, and 5 record, 3.32 goals against average, and 3 shutouts. Excellent. Quick reflexes for close-range plays, strong at positioning, and can be strong on rebounds, and not afraid of carrying a heavy workload. And oh yeah, he was also about to don one of the coolest goalie masks in the history of hockey. He joins the team this year as Tony Esposito's backup. Speaking of joining the team, Daryl Sutter joins the roster full-time this season. He spent most of the 1978-79 season in the Japanese League, where he scored 28 goals in 20 games. And he played 69 games for the New Brunswick Hawks in 1979-80, scoring 66 points in 69 games, and played 8 games for the Blackhawks last season, scoring 2 goals. To start the 1980-81 season, the Hawks will need a new coach, and they hired Keith Magnuson after Eddie Johnson left for a job in Pittsburgh. But they got off to a pretty bad start, starting 11, 17, and 6, and Pulford made a trade. On December 18, 1980, the Hawks sent defenseman Mike O'Connell to the Boston Bruins in exchange for power forward Al Secord. Once again, Pulford emphasizes on size, but this is actually a really good deal for the Hawks. Secord played with grit, aggression, and fearlessness. He was a low-line member of the Boston Bruins for 3 seasons, with 39 goals, 26 assists for 65 points, 166 games, but was a very good plus 27, and lends some more toughness to the Hawks with 337 penalty minutes, and does have a 20-plus goal season under his belt. So far this season in 18 games, he has 3 assists and is a plus 2. The Hawks will hope to mold him into a more efficient goal scorer. The Blackhawks did improve slightly and finished the 1980-81 season 31, 33, and 16 after their bad start. And they finished 10th overall in the league and made the playoffs, but were swept out in 3 straight by the Calgary Flames. Savard and Sutter delivered huge in their rookie seasons. Savard finished with 75 points in 76 games and a team best, plus 27. Sutter scored 40 goals. In what was a huge year for the rookie, Sutter finished 4th and Savard finished 5th respectively in Calder Trophy voting for Rookie of the Year. Tom Lysiak led the team in scoring, and the Hawks' overall scoring started to improve a little bit. Doug Wilson, Bob Murray, and Keith Brown were playing very well. Tony Esposito had a bit of a rough go, but did well on many nights. But Murray Bannerman's pro career was off to a terrible start. It was clear improvement was still needed heavily on this club. In the 1981-82 season, things still weren't getting much better. Once again, this team stays marred in mediocrity. However, Denny Savard delivered a huge season and is evolving into everything they need him to be. With 119 points, that's 6th best in league scoring that year. Yes, 6th with 119. That's the era for you. Al Secord scored 44 goals, having a career year. Tom Lysiak continued to play very well, but Sutter missed half the season. Hawks scoring improved to 7th best in the league. But Tony Esposito was showing some wear and tear. Bannerman showed slight improvement, but still had a lot of work to be done. But this season was at least one of slight hope for the Hawks. Because indeed, Doug Wilson, who has been their top defenseman, they'd say, for 5 seasons, was awarded with the Norris Trophy as the league's top defenseman, scoring a career-best 85 points. And he was leading by example out there in a big way. Keith Magnuson's coaching career, on the other hand, didn't last very long, and he was fired as head coach after 52 games in his 2nd season. Pulford took over for the final 28 games, and they finished with an overall record of 30, 38, and 12. That's really not good. But with a new divisional format, the Hawks in the Norris Division, their 72 points meant they were still much better than the Leafs and the Dead Thing Red Wings, and clinched the 4th and final playoff berth in their division. And in a huge upset, they beat the heavily favored Minnesota North Stars, who finished 22 points ahead of the Hawks, 3-1 in a best-of-5 series. Then they took out the Blues in 6 games. Then they made it all the way to the conference final. However, the Vancouver Canucks were a little more determined and took the Hawks out in 5. Either way, it seemed the mediocrity may finally be broken. Savard played great in the playoffs, as did Wilson. Either way, Chicago fans, well, they got excited over this, and you can see why. In the 1982 NHL draft, the Hawks had the 7th overall pick, and they took Ken Yaremchuk, a center from the Portland Winterhawks of the Western League. Ken was a good pick on paper. In 2 seasons, he notched 93 goals, 171 assists for 264 points in 144 games, adding 286 penalty minutes. Coming off a season with 58 goals, 99 assists for a huge 157 points in 72 games, and adding 181 minutes in the sin bin. He was also first-team All-Star and led Portland to the league championship and appeared in the Memorial Cup. But the fact is, and again, yes, this is strictly hindsight, of course, you still had Dave Andreychuk not taken, as well as Daryl Sutter's brother, Rich. Both would have been better choices, but now the Hawks need a new coach again, and who might that be? Well, they actually go with Orville Tessier, who had massive success in the Quebec Major Junior League from 71 to 80, with a record of 323 wins, 177 losses, and 58 ties. Remarkable. He coached back-to-back league champions in 72 and 73 with 2 different teams, the Cornwall Royals and the Quebec Remparts. In the former, he won the Memorial Cup and was a finalist in the other. And he never missed the playoffs. And also, team All-Stars that they picked back then included coaches. Tessier was a first-team All-Star coach in 72, 73, 75, and 76, and a second-team selection in 78. In the 1980-81 season, he moved to the Ontario League for the Kitchener Rangers and took an upstart team all the way to the league championship and won it all in a miracle run and was a finalist for the Memorial Cup. Then for the 1981-82 season, he graduated to the AHL, leading the New Brunswick Hawks to the best record in the league and a Calder Cup championship win. Speaking of that Calder Cup win, a big part of it was draft pick Steve Larmer from 1980, who thanks to his AHL coach Tessier, gets the call to be a part of the Blackhawks roster for the 1982-83 season, admiring his hustle, heart, and overall play. Since being drafted in his final year of junior hockey in 80-81, he scored 55 goals, 78 assists for 133 points in 61 games. In the 81-82 season for the New Brunswick Hawks, he scored 38 goals, 44 assists for 82 points in 74 games en route to the Calder Cup win. He has been called up for a grand total of 7 games, however, for the Blackhawks over the course of 2 seasons, and has notched an assist. And another 1980 draft pick gets the call, and that's Troy Murray. And his time at the University of North Dakota was a huge success. He is an all-second-team All-Star for the Western Collegiate Conference back-to-back in 81 and 82, and was an NCAA champion, leading the Fighting Hawks to win it all in 82. In 2 seasons there, he scored 55 goals, 74 assists for 129 points in just 80 games. And what a monster year it was for the Chicago Blackhawks. Wow, a record of 47 wins, 23 losses, 10 ties for 104 points, finishing first place in the Norris Division. Denny Savard was incredible. 121 points, third best in the league, and was picked as a second-team All-Star. The gamble of Steve Larmer getting a full-time spot on the roster paid off. 43 goals, 47 assists for 90 points, and was awarded the Calder Trophy as the league's top rookie. Al Secord scored 54 goals. Daryl Sutter had a comeback season with 31. Lacey still played very well. Doug Wilson and Bob Murray were excellent on defense, while Jack O'Callahan saw some action finally, playing 39 games. And on top of that, Murray Bannerman had a breakout season. He was excellent, taking over as the top goalie as Tony Esposito winds his career down. Bannerman was a finalist for the Vezina Trophy as the league's top goaltender. And the new man in charge, Orville Tossier, won the Jack Adams Award as Coach of the Year. In the playoffs, the Hawks downed the upstart Blues 3-1 in a best-of-5, and then took a solid North Stars team in 5 games in a best-of-7. And they ran into some punk kid from Brantford named Gretzky, and the Oilers in the Campbell Conference Final, and lost in 4 straight. You really can't be ashamed of that in that era. But be that as it may, Hawks fans were showing excitement and enthusiasm not seen since the prime days of Bobby and Stan. The chain of mediocrity had finally been broken this season. Despite Dollar Bill still being a cheap ass, the Hawks found their way. Just past the midway point of the season, however, the Hawks did make a trade, I should point out. On January 6, 1983, the Hawks sent Tony Tanti to the Vancouver Canucks in exchange for winger Curt Fraser. Yes, once again, Bully's obsession with size comes to the surface. And, okay, look, there's nothing wrong with Curt Fraser. Let's take a look at him. 6 foot, 200 pounds, 92 goals, 103 assists for 205 points in 348 games. Got a bit of a nasty streak with 651 penalty minutes in 5 seasons with the Canucks. And also made an appearance, however, in the Stanley Cup Final as a big part of the Canucks' miracle run in 82. But considering how well Tanti would do in Vancouver, perhaps this is one Pulford should have probably thought twice about. Draft day 1983 came about on June 8th, and hey, another trade was made. The Blackhawks sent defenseman Doug Crossman to the Philadelphia Flyers along with a second-round draft pick in exchange for rough and tough defenseman Ben Wilson. At this time, this wasn't seen as a bad deal at all, really. A towering 6'3" at 220 pounds and a downright mean streak, Ben Wilson be a huge asset to this blue line core. 6th overall pick from the Flyers, he has spent 5 seasons as a key part of their defense, and he's also pretty good on the offensive side of things. 59 goals, 155 assists for 214 points, and a huge plus 83 in 339 games. Also, he has accumulated 873 penalty minutes. He's also tremendous in the playoffs, 32 points in 43 postseason encounters, and has an appearance in the Stanley Cup Finals to his credit in 1980. He was also top 10 in the league for plus-minus in 81. In the 82-83 season, he notched 8 goals, 24 assists for 32 points, so plus 3, 92 penalty minutes in 62 games, as he has had issues with injuries. And during the draft itself, 59th overall in the 3rd round, they took Marc Bergevin, defenseman out of Chicoutimi, the Quebec Major Junior League. This is actually, I'd call this a bit of a steal. Bergevin played a traditional old-school stay-at-home style, and in 1 season with this club, he had 3 goals, 27 assists for 30 points, adding 113 minutes in the sin bin in 64 games. And he'd hopes are very high for the Hawks going into the 1983-84 season. But something happened. The Hawks fell apart completely. Injuries were a major factor. Al Secord only played 14 games. Gerald Sutter missed 21 games, as did new acquisition Ben Wilson. Tom Lasiak missed 26. Rick Patterson wasn't really coming along too well. Wasn't a great season for Doug Wilson, Keith Brown, and Bob Murray was probably the better of the Blue Liners that year. And Eddie Savard still played well with 94 points, but even some said he had consistency issues, as did Steve Larmer. Murray Bannerman did what he could in net and played some really good games, but also played some really bad ones. Tony Esposito sadly played very bad in what would be his final season, retiring after 15, all spent with Chicago. Plus, it seems Tessier lost a bit of control of this team, as the players didn't seem to look at him the same after the conference final in '83, after he said they all needed heart transplants after being swept by the Edmonton Oilers in '83 conference final. Bit harsh. The team finished a bad 30-42-8, but slipped into the playoffs. And they did put up a good fight against the Stars, but they lost in the fifth and deciding game. The enthusiasm that re-energized fans last year, it just disappeared. So now what? After all that false hope, just to go a few steps up and many steps back. Now they have a coach that players aren't fully confident in, and an owner who couldn't care less, of course, and players that are getting hurt, and even Pulford's decisions are being called into question now. Either way, this begins the next chapter of our story. We start at the 1984 NHL Draft, taking place on June 9th, 1984, from the Montreal Forum. Historic for many reasons. For one thing, this will be the first draft to take place live on national TV, broadcast on CBC. Also historic because the number one projected prospect was creating a buzz, and his name was Mario Lemieux. Chicago, due to a trade they made with LA that very day, moved all the way up to the third overall pick because they knew who they wanted. And they picked forward Eddie Olczyk, a hometown boy from Chicago who's been playing for the U.S. national team, and we'll get to him in just a short second. The only other draft pick who really did anything with the Hawks in this class, outside of Eddie that is, was Trent Yawney. He played 280 games for the Hawks, but he's not really part of our story, so let's take a close look at Ed Olczyk. Eddie had all the tools that Pulford looked for to be on his team. He had the size, but used it to create presence in front of the net. He could switch it from center to wing, solid face-off man, penalty killer, and used an offensive situation as protecting tight leads and late in the game. It was a dream for him to wear the uniform of the Blackhawks, and that was about to come true. He went to Canada in the 82-83 season to play in the Midwest Junior League, playing for the Stratford Colletons, scoring 50 goals, 92 assists for 142 points in just 42 games, nearly 3.4 points a game. Then he joined the U.S. national team for the 83-84 season, where in 62 games he recorded 21 goals, 47 assists for 68 points, and represented his homeland at the 1984 Winter Olympics in Sarajevo, where he played very well with 7 points in 6 games, but it was a rough go for the Americans in this tournament, finishing 7th. 10 days after the draft, however, the Hawks made a trade. They sent minor league defenseman Don Dietrich, winger Rich Preston, and future considerations to the New Jersey Devils in exchange for more future considerations and veteran center Bob McMillan. I mean, you would assume, I guess, it's that veteran depth and leadership. It's not as if McMillan's really been a house of fire in recent years. He's been a very good hockey player in the past, in 10 NHL seasons. He has scored 223 goals, 342 assists for 565 points in 716 games, and has a solid plus 15. He began his career at the New York Rangers for a brief 22 games, then spent a couple seasons with the St. Louis Blues where his game evolved, and then went to the Atlanta Flames where he had back-to-back 30-plus goal seasons, including 1979, where he's among the league's best overall scorers with 108 points, and was the recipient of the Lady Byng Trophy that season. He also adds more to the Hawks' penalty kill, which is one of the best things they have going for them, as he did make the top 10 in shorthanded goals in 80 and 81, also made the top 10 in even strength goals in 78 and 79. After a bad start in the 81-82 season, he was traded to the Colorado Rockies, where he drowned even further as they became the New Jersey Devils, where he'd been pretty much underwater. He's coming off a season of 17 goals, 23 assists for 40 points in 71 games, and a minus 20. Youch. Mind you, look at his team. And they needed a goalie to back up Bannerman this season, and in their system was an undrafted goalie named Warren Skorodensky. He has been in the AHL since 1980 and has never really been a starter. A record of 27-36 and 6, a 4.26 goals against average, and 3 shutouts. Okay. He did have a good 1981-82 season with the New Brunswick Hawks, but otherwise played for teams that just weren't very good. He actually did okay in the CHL with the Binghamton South Stars, 1982-83 going 11-11-1 with a 3.35 goals against average and a 900 save percentage plus a shutout. He's coming off an 83-84 split season between the Sherbrooke Jets and Springfield Indians, both of the AHL, finishing a rough 8-21-2, a bad 5.16 goals against average, and just as bad 858 save percentage. But before the season was set to begin, the 1984 Canada Cup, the third tournament of its kind, was set to take place. International competition, and 2 Blackhawk players represented their respective countries. Today, of course, this is best known as the World Cup of Hockey. Doug Wilson got to represent Team Canada, and he played a big part of a stacked team and played very well in some games and got himself a championship win. Ed Olczyk, prepping for his rookie NHL season, represented Team USA and was their leading scorer in the tournament. But now, it's showtime. The 1984-85 season is about to commence, and the Hawks go into it as one of the biggest question marks in the league. I mean, back in 83, they improved in their goal scoring with the 4th most. Then in 84, went to scoring the 3rd least. But again, that has a lot to do with Al Secor, their best scorer, goal scorer that is, being hurt most of the year. We'll see if he can maintain his health this season. Also, can Daryl Sutter, the team captain, keep his health in check? Nobody questions his leadership or his hustle and heart, but his injury status is always concerning. Can Kurt Fraser deliver? He only played 29 games last year. Ed Olczyk faces a lot of pressure his rookie season. After all, he is a top 5 draft pick, being 3rd, of course. Troy Murray is now entering his 3rd season and has shown his defensive prowess. The Hawks want a little bit more from him. Tom Lasiak needs to step up his game again, while Bill Gardner, Steve Ludzik, Ken Yaronchuk, Rick Patterson, and new acquisition Bob McMillan hope to play formidable roles for their team. The pressure is on for Steve Larmer, whose first 2 seasons were very good, but can he maintain his production? With a lineup like this, if they stay healthy, goals should be coming back. But how about the defense? We know how great Doug Wilson can be, and Bob Murray has been a workhorse for the team for a decade. Keith Brown has certainly shown he can contribute, and Ben Wilson can be solid, but his health is also in question. Jack O'Callahan showed a bit of promise the year prior. Jerry Dupont finally gets a big chance this year, as will Mark Bergevin, who enters his rookie year. This seems like a pretty solid core. In net, of course, Murray Bannerman, who has proven to be a very good goaltender, while the jury may be out on backup Skorodensky. And lastly, the man they've banked all their hopes on this decade of the 1980s, Denis Savard. He has more than proven that he is an investment that is well paid off and then some. But like any star player on a team whose future is questionable, he faces immense pressure. Also, can Coach Orville Tessier get back on the same page as his players? Bob Pulford in the GM box must be feeling the heat. Bill Wirtz in the owner's box just sits with his feet up. The fans have been through so much in many years, but let's also not forget, on the good side of things, they've made the playoffs 15 straight seasons. Their power play isn't too strong, but their penalty kill certainly is. Without any further ado, we are ready for opening night. October 11th. 1984, Chicago Stadium is the site as the Chicago Blackhawks open their season at home, taking on their hated division rivals, an original 6 rival to boot, the Detroit Red Wings. And after more than a decade of being the NHL's laughingstock, well, next to the Rockies and Capitals, of course, they slipped into the playoffs last year, giving their fans a glimmer of hope. And for your Chicago Blackhawks, Murray Bannerman gets the start in net, Keith Brown on defense, Dave Feimster also on defense, left winger Kurt Fraser, forward Bill Gardner, star right winger Steve Larmer, Steve Ludzik also at forward, and veteran Tom Lasiak at center. Veteran forward Bob McMillan makes his first appearance for the Hawks. At defense, veteran Bob Murray. At center, Troy Murray. Jack O'Callahan on defense, rookie and 3rd overall pick Eddie Olczyk gets the call at left wing. Rick Patterson at right wing, superstar Denis Savard as top center. Powerhouse Al Secor at left wing. Team captain Daryl Sutter at left wing. And rounding it out, 2 defensemen, tough Ben Wilson and all-star Doug Wilson. Head coach Orville Tessier and the Hawks are ready for action with a pretty healthy-looking roster. Chicago Stadium is a packed house tonight. We are officially underway as the puck drops for a new season. Both goalies are facing pressure early on as the Hawks fire in on Greg Stefan, but Bannerman is making big saves on his end as well. 5 minutes left in the first period and still no score. But as time continued to tick with 3:37 left to play in the period, Bob Murray gets the puck. Kurt Fraser then sees Troy Murray, who scores the first goal of the season for the Blackhawks, sending Chicago Stadium into a frenzy. And shortly after Troy's goal, Wings defenseman John Barrett was called for elbowing. So the Hawks go on a power play, which saw a heavy decline last season. However, with 1:23 left in the period, Keith Brown backs the extra man advantage, gets the puck to Sutter, who finds Steve Larmer on his opposite wing, who shoots it home and gives the Blackhawks a 2-0 lead, a lead they indeed carry into intermission, looking quite sharp so far. But in the second period, the Wings came right back and tied it with goals from defenseman Reed Larson and star forward Ron Duguay. But with 3:48 in the period remaining, Bill Gardner backs to play to the stick of Bob Murray, who puts it in front for Rick Patterson, and indeed gains the lead for the Hawks. They go up 3-2. Just a mere 14 seconds later, Bob clears out of his zone. Doug Wilson takes it into the Red Wings zone, fires it in for Bill Gardner. He scores. And just like that, it's 4-2 Chicago, and that's how the score will stay after 2 periods. But it didn't take long in the 3rd period for the Hawks to get going. Tom Lasiak takes the puck, sends it in for Daryl Sutter, who makes it a 3-goal lead for Chicago. Just 1:48 later, however, the Wings cut it back to a 2-goal deficit at 5-3. But as we're just past the midway point of the period, the Hawks are still protecting their lead, and Bannerman makes some big stops. Troy Murray controls the puck. It's loose to defenseman Feimster, who sets it right up and on goal for Eddie Olczyk, his first career goal, his first career game, and Chicago now had a big 6-3 lead with nearly 8 minutes to play. Time is winding down, and the Hawks are making dead sure the Wings can't get back in it. With 2:59 left, Troy Murray has it, getting it to Patterson, sets it up for Steve Ludzik. That's right, he makes it 7-3, and that is all she wrote. That is indeed the final score. The Chicago Blackhawks starting out the season right with a big win over their rivals. And the 3 stars of the game. First is Troy Murray. One of the best performances of his young career. A goal, 2 helpers for 3 points. It was a +3. Second star is Bob Murray. The defenseman had 3 assists and was a +2. And forward, Rick Patterson is the 3rd star with a goal and a helper, plus a huge +4. Also great games from Sutter, Ludzik, and Gardner. Also Doug Wilson, Brown, and Feimster were great on defense, and Bannerman played excellent in net. Also a good debut for rookie Eddie Olczyk. But then it was back-to-back losses to bring them way back down to earth. A 7-6 loss in overtime to the New York Islanders, who were coming off of 5 straight Stanley Cup appearances and losing their first one just the prior season. Still led by Bossy, Trottier, and Potvin, however, as well as Daryl Sutter's brothers Brent and Duane. Remember, back then, overtime losses didn't count for a point. It was a loss, pure and simple. Gardner, Sutter, and Lasiak each had a goal and a helper, while Bannerman had a tough night, facing 42 shots and let in all 7 goals. They return home to face a powerful Caps team led by the incredible defense of Larry Murphy, Scott Stevens, and back-to-back Norris Trophy winner Rod Langway, as well as speedy star forward Mike Gardner. Hawks lost 5-3 in a game that the Hawks they never really had control of, and Eddie Savard missed the only game he'd actually missed all season. Gardner, Secord, and Olczyk got the goals. But hey, our boys rebound with an exciting win over their division rivals, the St. Louis Blues, led by Bernie Federico, youngster Doug Gilmour, and Daryl Sutter's brother Brian. It was a seesaw battle. The Blues struck early in the first, but Jack O'Callahan, not known for scoring goals, tied it to end the first period. Then late in the second, Ludzik gave the Hawks the lead, but 20 seconds later, the Blues equaled it 2-2 after 2. Kurt Fraser scores his first of the year early in the third. With 3:21 to play, Federico ties it for the Blues. With 1:02 to go, it was Larmer to Sutter to Lasiak, who gets the game winner. Murray Bannerman rebounded with a huge, excellent 33 save performance as well, while Steve Larmer comes alive. And however, Tom Lasiak, despite being the game hero, will miss the next 3. Ken Yaremchuk gets the call-up from Milwaukee in the IHL as a result. And it would be bad, however, following, as the Red Wings would get revenge for opening night and down the Hawks 7-4. Bill Gardner, however, is one of the hottest players on the Hawks in the first 5 games, and not just 2 assists. Bad night for Bannerman again, 7 goals on 36 shots. Ugh. But then the fortunes change big time. They host a winless LA Kings team led by Marcel Dion, Dave Taylor, and Bernie Nichols. And Warren Skorodenski gets his first start of the season on net. It's his first start since January 25th, 1982, and just the second NHL start of his career. And he plays very well, stopping 27 of 29 shots in a 5-2 Hawks win. Bill Gardner is still red hot with another 2 goals. Another player making his NHL debut in this game was Mark Bergevin, in for Jack O'Callahan, and Bergevin gets 2 helpers in his first game and is a +2. Troy Murray, Daryl Sutter, and Kurt Fraser have a goal and a helper each. Also, Jerry Dupont gets activated as well on defense and was a +2, as Hawks actually dressed 7 defensemen in this game in place of forward Patterson, who misses is the only game he'll sit out this year. The Hawks do get some bad news, however. Daryl Sutter is going to miss the next 6 games. Then the Hawks really take it to another Smythe Division basement dweller. That's the Vancouver Canucks, led by former Hawk Tony Tanti, winning by a score of 9-3. Bannerman is back in net and is sensational despite the one-sided game, as he did stop 40 shots. Denis Savard, who just had 3 points in 5 games and was a -3, was amazing here. He has 3 points in this game, 1 goal, 2 helpers, and a +2. Steve Larmer, goal, 2 assists, 3 points, +3. Doug Wilson, goal, 2 assists, 3 points. Ben Wilson, 2 goals, a +4. Dupont with 2 assists, +3. Keith Brown, a +3. And two players who have pretty much been pylons out there so far this season finally broke out. Al Secord, a goal and a -2 this season. Then had a goal, a helper, and then Bob McMillan so far has had 0 points and has a god-awful -7 on this day. Goal, a helper, +3. Then it was another thrilling win over the Blues as Tom Lysiak returns, trailing 3-1 in the second. Doug Wilson with the second goal of the game, but they still trail 3-2 after 2. Secord tied the game 34 seconds into the third, giving Doug an assist, giving him a 3-point night. The Blues retook the lead, however, but around the midway point of the period, rookie Eddie O tied it again. Then with 3:26 left, Larmer scores the game winner as Stevie L had a goal and a helper. Savard also had 2 apples himself. Bannerman had stopped 31 shots, 3 straight wins, and just 2 more games to end the month. But the streak came to a screeching halt when the Hartford Whalers, off to a surprisingly good start led by Ronnie Francis, beat the Hawks 4-1. Chicago ran into a hot goalie, Steve Weeks. Fraser gets the only goal for the Hawks. Bannerman is off one net, 4 goals and 18 shots. Then the Hawks faced their division rivals to end October on the 30th, the Minnesota North Stars, who, despite being a playoff favorite, led by Brian Bellows, Dino Ciccarelli, Neil Broughton, plus Craig Hartsburg on defense, they were off to a horrible start at 2-6. But our heroes had to settle for a 5-5 tie on this one, the first draw of the year. But Denis Savard, he was all over the highlight reels across the league sports news stations on this one. And he was truly sensational. In on all 5 goals, 2 goals, 3 assists for those 5 points. Steve Larmer, 2 goals, 2 assists for 4 points. Secord also played excellently. Not the worst way to end the month. Pretty good start, I'd say, as the Norris division is looking rough overall. And remember, we're still in the era of the divisional playoff format. 5-4-1, the Hawks sit 11 points, first place in the Norris. Even early in the season, being 4 points ahead of the third place team, this being Toronto, is quite the gap. Hawks offense is looking solid, averaging 4.9 goals per game, just short of 5, which really is what you need to survive in this era. However, they've allowed pretty much 4 a game, which, yeah, almost par for this era for a lot of teams, but they'll need to improve on that. Chicago's power play is still somewhat lowly, but their penalty kill to start the season is among the league's best. Now we look at the scoring for October. Steve Larmer was the top scorer this month for the Hawks. Got off to a little bit of a short start, but really came alive, especially in that performance against the Stars to end the month. He totals 5 goals, 10 assists for 15 points, playing in all 10 games. Also very consistent with his two-way play to boot. Superstar Denis Savard is second with 5 goals, 8 assists for 13 points, and he was also +3. He actually got out to a really slow start, but was his old self by the end of the month. He played in 9 games, missing just 1. Defenseman Doug Wilson was third in team scoring. 3 goals, 8 assists for 11 points, and was a good +4. Had those back-to-back 3-point games and wins over the Canucks and Blues. Always effective on the offensive attack, and his defensive game was also on point this month. Bill Gardner got off to a hot start and had a good month. He cooled down a little bit by the end. Troy Murray had perhaps the best month of his entire career at this point. He was superb on the penalty kill and racked up 10 points. Sutter was actually playing quite well until his injury. Steve Ludzik was very good on the penalty kill and is proving to be a solid two-way presence. Kurt Fraser played excellent in some games, as did Rick Patterson. Al Secord was off to a terrible start, but actually was really picking things up by the end of the month. Tom Lysiak had a couple really good games to start the season, but otherwise hasn't been playing overly well. Bob McMillan has proven to be completely useless. He and Lysiak are tied for a team worst -9 this month. However, call-out Kenny Ramczyk has played pretty well in the time he's been given. Steve Larmer's +7 was the best for the team all month, and again, he was also key in defensive situation to go with his offensive prowess. Speaking of defense, of course you know by now, Doug Wilson led all defensemen in scoring with his 11 points this month, but he along with Keith Brown were actually the 2 best Chicago defensemen to begin the year. And the Blue Line core was jumbled around quite a bit, sometimes due to injury, other times due to Tessier just wanting to change things up. Mark Bergevin seemed to do quite well once given his chance to play, but he's been dealing with some injuries as well. Jerry Dupont played very well in a couple games. Feimster and O'Callaghan haven't been all that consistent, but I wouldn't say they were bad. Seasoned vet Bob Murray, however, did play well for the most part, while Ben Wilson seemed to go back and forth between excellent and meh. And now to the goalies. Murray Bannerman played all but 1 game this month. He totaled a record of 4-4-1 and was actually standing on his head in many games, playing excellent net minding. But he did have a few disastrous nights, as his rough 4.4 goals against average and a 70 save percentage seems to say. Warren Skorodensky won his only game that he played this month and only allowed 2 goals in it and had a .931 save percentage. While it is just 1 game, perhaps the Hawks should give him more thought and more playing time. Well, now let's see what's ahead for November. The Hawks' tie against the Stars to end October was the start of a 6-game road trip, and the next 4 games we played out west, and oh boy, the defending Stanley Cup champion Edmonton Oilers now stand in their way. Yep, Gretzky and the gang are all here, and the Oilers at this point have yet to lose a game this season. And that's not going to change here. The Hawks drop a 4-2 decision. Murray Bannerman faced an onslaught of shots. He stopped 37 of them. Larmer and Yaremchuk get the goals. And things are now getting a little concerning as the road trip continue, as they go winless in 4 after dropping a 6-4 loss to the Canucks, who are on a 9-game losing streak going into this. So yeah, this is a bad one for the Hawks. Bannerman was pulled early in the 3rd period after allowing his 5th goal, and Skorodenski came in. Troy Murray did score 2 goals, and Doug Wilson had a goal and a helper, and Savard and Larmer are still keeping their little point streaks alive. Secord had a rough night, however, and Bergevin returned to action. Well, good news going into a game in LA, Daryl Sutter's back. But bad news, Murray Bannerman's a little banged up. Leaves the game after the 1st period. Skorodenski comes in for the 2nd period. Back and forth game where Troy Murray stays hot, assisting on Olchik's early game-tying goal in the 3rd period. And then midway in the 3rd, Murray scores a power play goal, and that's the game winner in a 3-2 win. Ben Wilson and Keith Brown each had 2 assists in this one as well. Then it was back to Canada in Calgary, and the Hawks win another one, 5-3 over a solid-looking Flames team led by Kent Nilsson and sophomore defenseman Al McInnes. Savard had a goal and a helper. Doug Wilson had 2 assists. Warren Skorodenski gets his 2nd start of the season and was sensational in net. 36 saves on 39 shots, making some highlight reel level stops. Troy and Bob Murray played very well, no relation, as did Olchik and Fraser, who were also top-notch. Then, at last, they faced the one-division rival they had yet to encounter this season, the lowly Leafs in Toronto, on a nationally televised game on Hockey Night in Canada on CBC. Bannerman returns in net. The Hawks trail 4-1 as the 2nd period was winding down. However, Larmer and Fraser scored 41 seconds apart to close the gap to 4-3, and Larmer scored the tying goal in the 3rd, and the Hawks walk away with a 4-4 tie. But regardless, are unbeaten in the last 3. Bannerman stopped 38 of 42 shots in the draw. Savard and Wilson each had 2 helpers. Larmer Sorokas got him named 2nd star of this game, as his clutch prowess really shined through in this one. The Hawks had a lot of life in them in the last 3 games, and they're ready to come home. But can they keep up the momentum? Actually, indeed they do, as they return home to host a solid-looking New York Rangers team led by Pierre LaRouche and the Maloney brothers, and they win it 6-4 in a huge cohesive effort. How cohesive was it? No one player on the Hawks had 2 points. 14 different players had at least 1 point, a very focused and determined win that brings their unbeaten streak to 4 games. And the unbeaten streak then reaches 5 games as they hit the road again, this time in Hartford, who are struggling quite a bit, and the Hawks destroy them 7-0. Warren Skorodenski gets the first shutout of the year for the Hawks, stopping all 32 shots. Troy Murray, who is already having a banner season, has a goal, 2 helpers. Not only that, was a +3, and made the night hell for opposing Whalers star Ron Francis, who is a -4. Steve Larmer stays red hot, 2 more goals. Al Secord, who again went into a slump, broke out with a goal and a helper. And rookie Eddie Olchik also had 1 of each. Savard had 2 assists, as did Bob Murray, who was also a massive +4. Dave Feemster also played great and was a +3. But they couldn't keep up the consistency and went on to lose 3 in a row. First, it was a home-on-home series with the Quebec Nordiques, a team led by superstars Peter Stastny and Michel Goulet, but we're not off to a good start this season. Hawks dropped this one, however, 5-3. Larmer, McMillan, and Callahan get the goals. Keith Brown and Ben Wilson have a brutal outing. At least in La Belle Province against the Nords, they put up a better effort, and Al Secord scored a goal with 1:04 remaining to tie the game. They lost in overtime. Bannerman made 37 saves, and Lasiak, who's been slumping lately, scored a goal. Larmer and Savard were held pointless. Then Brown played another brutal game. Then it was on to the famous Forum in Montreal to face a red-hot Habs club led by star forwards Bobby Smith and Mats Naslund, as well as rookie defenseman Chris Chelios and the legendary Larry Robinson on the blue line. The Habs led 2-0, but goals by Sutter and Wilson tied the game before the end of the 2nd. But that's as good as it would get. Bob Murray assisted on both goals. Bannerman was left out to dry many times, stopping 32 of 35 shots. Larmer plays perhaps the only real bad game he has played so far this year. Savard and Secord were also not that good, and Brown's play just continues to be horrible. But at last, the road trip starts to go better as the Hawks visit star defenseman Ray Bourque and a very inconsistent-looking Bruins team. Skorodenski is the story of this one. Another marvelous performance in net. 37 saves on 38 shots. And the Hawks win a tight one, 2-1. Secord and Savard each with a goal and a helper. But as they continue this journey through the Northeast, it's not so good the next couple of games as the Hawks get shut out for the first time this season. 5-0 to the Caps. Their normally awesome penalty kill was actually decimated by the Caps' awesome power play. Just a bad game all around from Chicago. And they were missing Doug Wilson, who also missed the next game. Then they visit a scorching hot Philadelphia Flyers club led by Tim Kerr and Brian Propp up front, as well as Daryl's baby twin brothers, Rich and Ron Sutter, as well as the defense led by Mark Howe, Brad McCrimmon, and Brad Marsh. They put up more of a fight here, but it was all for naught, as they lose 4-2, but Bill Gardner, who has not been playing well as he did in October, got both goals, while Skorodensky actually suffers his first loss of the season in net, but defense was bad here, and he was hung out to dry a lot. He stopped 44 of 48 shots. Can't allow that many shots against a team like Philly in this era. Also, this game is rather unfortunate for another reason, as Dave Feemster, who was actually playing very well this month, was encountering more back problems. The game against Philly would be his 169th and last NHL game. This means Bergevin will be a full-time member of the roster going forward. The Hawks at least end the month very strong with a 6-3 win over the pathetic Penguins, as sadly we didn't get to see the showdown between Denis Savard and Mario Lemieux, as the rookie Lemieux was hurt and didn't play. But Savard was superb. He notched his second career hat trick. Wow, Daryl Sutter scored 2 goals himself. Gardner stayed hot with a goal and a helper, while Larmer and Fraser had 2 apples. So did Doug Wilson, who returned to action and will not miss any more games this year. And also Keith Brown, who has been heavily criticized, and I have to say rightfully so at this point, broke his funk and played a beauty, thus ending November. Despite the 5-game unbeaten streak, it wasn't what you'd call a great month. The Hawks finished 6-7-1 for the month of November, as they went on to lose 5 of 7 after the unbeaten stretch. That moves their overall record to 11 wins, 11 losses, 2 ties for 24 points. Yep, still in first place, but only just 1 point ahead of the St. Louis Blues. Also, the Stars are starting to get it together, it seems, after this month, and now sit just 3 points back of first, while the Wings and Leafs bring up the rear. Big shock. Their goal production, however, went down significantly, averaging just 3.4 goals a game. That cold streak near the end dipped it big time, but they also allowed an average of around 3.4 points a game. That's a huge improvement. They just needed to get these things on a more consistent, even keel. However, their power play did show some big improvement this month. Their penalty kill saw a slight dip. Coach Orval Tissier is coming under fire now for not keeping things consistent on all ends of the game. Denis Savard led the team in scoring for the month of November with a big 7 goals, 11 assists for 18 points in 14 games. He was a -2, did have a couple rough outings, but he did end the month with that huge hat trick. Coming in second was defenseman Doug Wilson. Very impressive, 2 goals, 12 assists for 14 points, averaging a point a game. It was a solid +3 and was key on the setup and passing game. And coming in third was Steve Larmer, who had a big 8 goals, which is a team best, and adding 4 assists for 12 points and a -3, just a month after leading the team in a +-. He had some sensational, outstanding performances, but also some very rough outings. Be that as it may, the top 3 remains the same this month, just all in different spots. However, big-time credit has to go to Troy Murray's game this month, as he was just a warrior out there, game in and game out, and is having a career season so far. Rookie Eddie Olczyk played some fantastic outings, and indeed was quite consistent in his production. Kurt Fraser played very well. Patterson had his moments. Lasiak seems to have lost a step. McMillan showed slight improvement, and I mean slight. I heavily emphasize on that. Ludzik was solid. Daryl Sutter returned and looked quite good, and he's getting in the groove again. Al Secord, however, once again starts the month badly, but then ends up playing some really good games, but critics are really on him to get things going and return to form. While Gardner, who started off the year hot, cooled down almost to icicles, but still played a couple really good games. This forward core, while not bad, simply just needs to be better. Also, it's a bittersweet accolade for defenseman Dave Feemster. His career comes to an end, yet he led the team in +- this month of November with an excellent +6. I wanted to actually save Feemster's story for this section. A native of Detroit, Michigan, he was drafted 96 overall by the Hawks in 1978 while playing for Colorado College. He completed his tenure there by 1980, having totaled 184 points in 150 games. He was second-team All-West Collegiate in 79 and first-team in 1980. He was also named American Hockey Coaches Association West All-American, and after 2 tenures in the minor leagues and a 29-game stint with Chicago in 81-82, he made the full-time roster in 82-83 and actually had a very good season. But then he missed 34 games the following year due to injuries. And of course, in the end, it was a stress fracture in the 5th lumbar vertebrae that ended it for him. It may have been a very sad ending to his career, But not a sad ending to his life, as he went on to own 6 Little Caesars franchises in the state of Colorado, is very active and well liked in the community. He was the best defenseman of the month, but so was Doug Wilson. I say they were on an even par, who still kept his quality play up, and of course, yes, as you know, led the team in defensive scoring. The same, however, can't be said for Keith Brown, who was great in October. Did a 180 this month, had some really bad outings, but looked like he was starting to pick it up by the end of the month. Let's hope that momentum continues. But also, Tennessee's jumbling of this defense, plus the injuries, and especially to Feimster, definitely aren't helping. However, I will say Bob Murray still played excellently in many games, but the big surprise was actually Jerry O'Callahan, who looked really good in the action that he saw. Mark Bergevin, however, after a solid debut in October, has not looked good in what action he has seen. Jerry Dupont was a team worst -6, and Ben Wilson just having consistency issues all across the board. Also, this core needs to provide more relief to their goalies, which brings us to, yes, the goalies. Murray Bannerman had a terrible 2-6-1 record, but oddly enough, he improved his other numbers from last month. He was a 3.95 goals against average, a very good 896 save percentage, which not bad, again, that considering the era, but sadly, as I somewhat alluded to, the defense left him out to dry on many nights, and he was standing on his head. But Warren Skorodenski, on the other hand, was superb everywhere, as he was indeed the best goalie this month with a 4-1-0 record and an insanely amazing 2.21 goals against average. Again, that was almost borderline impossible in this era. And a 938 save percentage, which was also off the charts, and added a shutout. It's clear the backup is having the better fortune, so now the Hawks are at a crossroad with their goalies. Obviously, Bannerman has just suffered some misfortune, but I wouldn't say it's time to panic with him yet. What's going to happen going forward, though? Well, let's find out as we head into December. The Hawks, however, start December right with a 5-3 win over the lowly New Jersey Devils in the Garden State. It was a solid game all around. Troy Murray is still killing it. He had a shorthanded goal, adding a helper for 2 points. Also, Gardner and Olchuk also notched 1 each, while Sutter had 2 apples. Then it was back home to face the Kings, who have actually really turned it around lately, and the Hawks had to fight for a 5-5 tie. They were trailing 2-1 after the first period. Frazier tied the game, and then the Kings retook the lead 3-2. However, goals by Yaremchuk and Sutter gave them the lead back 4-3 after 2 periods. But 2 goals 2-3 apart by Kings All-Star Bernie Nichols, which gave him a hat-trick no less, made it 5-4, but exactly 2 minutes later, Doug Wilson notched a power play marker to tie it 5-5, and that's how it would stay. Bannerman had a busy night, facing 44 shots, stopping 39. Larmer had a goal and a helper, so did Sutter. Savard and Gardner each had 2 assists. But they hit the L column again in a visit to their division rivals, the Detroit Red Wings, down 2-0 after 1 period. Larmer actually scored 2 to get them back in it and tie the game, but the Hawks trailed 4-2 shortly after that. Frazier scored 1 at the end of the second and the beginning of the third. To tie it 4-4, but the Hawks would ultimately lose it 5-4. Skorodenski suffers a loss in this one. In addition to Larmer and Frazier's big performances, Keith Brown had 2 assists, and Doug Wilson had a pretty rough night. The Hawks, however, get back in the swing of things with us. Dominant 7-2 win over Rick Vive and the basement-dwelling Maple Leafs. And wow, what a night for Denis Savard, his second hat-trick of the year. Scoring 3 goals and adding an assist to boot for 4 points, it was a big +3. And Doug Wilson, who looked pretty rough the last couple games, responds emphatically with 2 goals, a helper for 3 points, and a monster +4. Keith Brown, Troy Murray, and Tom Lasiak had 2 assists each. Secord had a goal and a helper, and Bob Murray played a beauty. Bannerman gets the win, stopping 23 shots. Then they got the better of the Wings in a dominant 5-1 performance. Steve Larmer scored 2 goals. Doug Wilson stays hot with a goal and an assist. And Gardner, who is hot again, notched 2 assists. Troy Murray also was in the face of Steve Yzerman the whole game. However, Al Secord is hurt as his old abdominal injuries have come back to haunt him. He's going to be out for 2 months. Either way, the Hawks surge forward and get their 3rd straight win, going 3-for-3 over their division rivals, a 5-3 triumph over the Stars in the Twin Cities. Daryl Sutter scored 2 goals. Doug Wilson is staying hot with 3 assists. Frazier and Olchuk had a goal and a helper each, as the Hawks are rolling through the competition in their division, outscoring them in the last 3 games a total of 17-6. But then it was back-to-back losses. First, completing a home-and-home with the Stars, where the Hawks in turn were defeated 5-3. Yet Denis Savard notches his 2nd hat-trick in 4 games, his 3rd of the year. Crazy to think he only had 1 his whole career before this season started. For Bannerman, it's actually his first loss of the month. They proceed to lose to a struggling Sabres club, however, who have been a big disappointment this season, dropping 6-3 decision. And after playing well most of the month, Bannerman is awful. He lets in 4 goals in just 10:43 of the first period. He's pulled. Skorodenski comes in. He played decent, but the Hawks still lose 6-3. Larmer and Gardner have a goal and a helper each. For Larmer, it's his 20th goal of the season. Also, after missing several games, Bob McMillan returned. However, Eddie Olczyk is out of action for the next little while. But then things turn around against the Leafs. What do you know? And tonight belongs to both Troy Murray and Tom Lysiak, the latter of whom plays his best game of the season so far. Lysiak had a goal and 2 hoppers for 3 points, and with the game tied at 3-3 going into the third, Troy Murray scored his second goal of the game just 30 seconds into the period. He also had an assist earlier in the night for a 3-point night. And after that goal, Skorodenski barred the door after he got the start in this one, stopping 31 of 34 shots, making some excellent saves, and the Hawks hold on for a 4-3 win. Bob Murray also had 2 assists in the day. Doug Wilson was excellent once again, and Bob McMillan probably played his best game of the year. But then it was another overtime loss to the Nordiques. The Hawks were up 2-0 in this one thanks to goals from Doug Wilson and Savard, the latter getting his 20th of the season. But the Nords tied it. The second, it was 2-2 after 2, and after a scoreless third, the game went to overtime, where of course they ultimately lost. Bannerman was amazing in net, however, standing on his head, stopping 41 shots. Then they lost a very important game, however, to the St. Louis Blues, who now tied the Hawks' point total for the Norris division, as the Hawks dropped this seesaw battle 4-3. Kurt Fraser had 2 goals, while Savard had assist on all 3 Blackhawk goals. Hawks have now lost 4 of 5. And more bad news, Daryl Sutter is now going to miss close to 2 months as his injuries continue to mount. But hey, once again, they can beat the Leafs. Another thrill ride, 5-4. After trailing 1-0 early, Ben Wilson and Bob McMillan score 1:34 apart to take a 2-1 lead. The Leafs tied 2-2 after 1. Then Toronto went up 3-2. Kurt Fraser would later tie the game on a power play, and then late in the period, Kenny Yaremchuk gives the Hawks a 4-3 lead after 2 periods. The Leafs, however, tie it under a minute into the third period, but with just 52 seconds remaining in the third period, Gardner and Ludzik set up Steve Larmer for the game winner. Larmer and Fraser each had a goal and an assist. Gardner had 2 assists, while Bannerman breaks his personal 4-game losing streak. But they ended the calendar year of 1984 on a sour note. It was a 5-2 loss at home to Calgary, despite the return of Olczyk, as Lysiak and Savard get the goals in this one. Ended the month losing 5 of 7 after beginning the month losing one of their first 6 games. Well, overall, no real improvement, but not exactly getting any worse. This seems to be a common theme throughout this video. So the Hawks only did slightly better than they did last month, managing 1 loss less because we also played 1 game less, 6-6-1 in 13 games for December, moving their overall mark to 17-17-3 for 37 points. Yet they are still in first place, barely 2 points above the threatening Blues. However, the Stars are slumping again. The Red Wings are showing slight improvement, and the Leafs, of course, are doing nothing in dead last. And we are just a few games away from the halfway point of the season. Tessier's coaching is still being called into question. While there were obviously injury issues, this team still seem to be capable of a lot more. Just consistency is not there. They averaged 4.1 goals per game, a very good boost up from the last month. However, they allowed 3.7 per game, which is only up slightly from 3.4, so not great news, but not exactly a disaster either. Their power play was, again, okay this month, but still could use some tweaks, and despite great play from Troy Murray, their penalty kill actually wasn't all that strong this month. Well, what do you know? It's the familiar faces in the top 3 for the 3rd straight month. And for the 2nd straight, Denis Savard leads the team in scoring with 9 goals, 8 assists for 17 points, including 2 hat tricks. He is also a +1. He's still dazzling the fans in Chicago everywhere and even on the road. Once again, he does show that he has a good work ethic. Steve Larmer had just 1 less assist than Savard, coming in 2nd in scoring, tying the team lead in goals with 9, and adding 7 assists for 16 points, and was a +2, and again, consistent workhorse out there, always pulling his weight game in and game out, and still has a tremendous durability. Doug Wilson, however, is making his candidacy for the Norris Trophy as best defenseman known, having his best month yet this season, 6 goals, 9 assists for 15 points, and a big +8. After a rough season in 83-84, he's looking more like the man who won the Norris back in 82. Bill Gardner, who started the year off hot, cooled down quite a bit, but is back playing like he did in October. He had 14 points and was a warrior up there many nights. And the same can be said for Kurt Fraser, who actually had an amazing month himself and scored 8 goals. Tom Lysiak, who's been very quiet so far this year and pretty much criticized, really broke out with a huge month, once again showing he has an intense play and leadership still in him, and he was a +7. Troy Murray is still providing that amazing two-way presence, and he's found a scoring touch as well this season. After 37 games, he has 31 points, which surpassed his point total last season of 30. Despite missing some games, rookie Eddie Olczyk still playing well. Daryl Sutter was playing very well, but once again, his health rears its ugly head. And I will say Bob McMillan, pretty darn good upon his return to action. Al Secord was doing decent until he got hurt. Ludzik played okay. Patterson was playing his role just fine. And Yaremchuk had a couple of good games. Either way, this forward core was top-notch and definitely improved over November. And ain't that fitting, the two best defensemen of the month are showcased here. I mentioned how Doug Wilson was a +8, and so was Bob Murray, which ties the team lead. He had his best month of the season so far, and just superb. Both really showed a high level of consistency that did improve things a bit on this core. Keith Brown, however, started out well and cooled down, as did Ben Wilson. However, Mark Bergevin, who has more responsibility now, had a solid month, as did Jerry Dupont, who only saw minimal action. But again, the one who should get more recognition is Jack O'Callahan, who again this month made the most of the chances he was given and is actually key in many Hawks wins this month and making some big defensive plays. Either way, despite the loss of Feimster, the core overall, more often than not, was actually quite good this month. And the goalies. Murray Bannerman was looking more like his old self at the beginning of the month, but towards the end, the woes began. He did finish with a passable 5-5-1 record, a huge improvement over his disastrous November record, and his goals against average improved this month with a 3.69, 0.26 less than last month, so very good, but his save percentage, however, went down. Bannerman's numbers just seem to be all over the place so far this season. And there's actually many that are surprised that Warren Skorodensky only saw minimal action. He only played 3 games and started just 2. He had a win and a loss each, though playing very well in the win. His save percentage was an 888. His goals against average was a 3.56. Seasons of Tessier will keep his faith in Bannerman. As now, we greet the new year of 1985 as we hit January. Well, hey, happy 1985 to start the year, as the Hawks get a nice 3-2 win over the Montreal Canadiens. Lysiak, Fraser, and O'Callahan got the goals, and Bannerman is superb in net, stopping 26 to 28 shots. That's exactly what the Hawks need at this point. But then it was back-to-back losses. First in Hartford against the Whalers. They played a very tight game, a seesaw battle, and came up short, losing 4-3. Steve Ludzik, however, had one of the best games of his career with 2 goals and an assist for 3 points. Larmer had a goal and a helper each, and Gardner had 2 assists. Skorodensky got the start in net and faced a barrage, stopping 37 of 41 shots. And then they lost their division rivals, the St. Louis Blues, who are now 1 point out of first. The Hawks lost 3-2, another tight one, running into hot goalie Rick Wamsley. Bannerman, however, to his credit, did all he could, stopping 42 of 45 shots. Yaremchuk and Doug Wilson get the goals. But then Savard had a goal and an assist, while Bannerman was excellent again, stopping 32 shots, as the Hawks skate past division rival North Stars 4-3. But then it's another pair of back-to-back losses as Chicago gets throttled 6-1 by the ferocious Flyers. Bannerman lets in all 6. Fraser gets the only goal. And a lot of players play pretty badly here. Olczyk, Bergevin, and Bob Murray really stand out in their poor play here. Their top guns are also being called out for a lack of production, which after this, yeah, I guess I can see why. But they did put up a better fight against the Islanders, but they were playing catch-up the whole game, down 6-2. And in the third period, goals from Troy Murray, Lysiak, and Savard made it 6-5. Troy Murray, speaking of which, had 2 goals total in that game. Savard had a goal and 2 assists for 3 points. Doug Wilson had 2 apples, as he too has taken some criticism. After missing a few games, Keith Brown returned and actually played very well. Also, Bannerman got hurt in the game. Skorodensky came in and didn't fare all that much better. And more bad news. Kurt Fraser gets hurt and will miss the next 7 games. But then the Hawks bounced back with a victory over Dale Hawerchuk and a good-looking Winnipeg Jets club at home, 6-3. Rick Patterson, a lower-line role player, has actually been playing really well so far this month, scored 2 goals, while Gardner had 3 assists. Yaremchuk played very well with a goal and a helper, while Savard and Bob Murray had 2 apples. Skorodensky played very well in net, stopping 31 of 34 shots. Troy Murray helped contain Jet star Hawerchuk much of the game. Bob McMillan scored a goal here, and the reason I point that out is because it's been a very rough year for Bob, including a minor league assignment. It'd actually be his 228th goal in his 752nd NHL game, his final one, because he suffered a shoulder injury that would end his pro career for good. But it's another 2 losses in a row. First to the Sabres, who have turned their fortunes around as of late, and the Hawks lose 4-3. Savard, a goal, 2 assists, 3 points. He's still having a great year, still playing very well, but this team just cannot stay steady. And hey, we finally get a showdown with Savard and Lemieux as the Hawks visit the Lily Pens and really choke this one away. Lysiak, Murray, Olczyk, and Larmer all scored, and it was 4-0 after 1. Then Pittsburgh made it 5-4 after 2, and it was still 5-4 after 3. Yeah. A game that actually saw lots of fights as the Hawks were clearly a frustrated bunch. Both teams combined for 116 penalty minutes. Troy Murray did play his best game so far this month. He had a goal and 2 assists for 3 points. Lysiak also had a goal and 2 helpers, as he's otherwise been brutal this month. Olczyk had a goal and an assist. Bannerman returned and made little difference. Savard and Lemieux, well, let's see. Savard had 2 assists, was an even 0, while rookie Lemieux had a goal and an assist for 2 points and was a -2. Now, okay, injuries are been a factor, granted, but Tessier doesn't seem to be attempting to get this team together to win it all. And his coaching methods are really being called out more than ever. And many feel the disconnect between he and his players are just too far apart to salvage at this point. Hawks have now lost 6 of 9 so far this month. But hey, the Hawks respond huge with a 7-2 thrashing of the Stars. Big game across the board. Bannerman plays a beauty and goal, 33 saves. But the big 3 truly delivered. Doug Wilson, a goal, 3 assists, 4 points. Steve Lemmer scored 2 goals, added an assist for 3 points and a +3. And the second goal was his 30th of the year. He has now reached that mark in all 3 of his NHL seasons. Hit Denis Savard, a goal, 2 assists, 3 points. Gardner had a goal and a helper, and O'Callahan played really well in this one. This is exactly what they need to garner momentum, to get intense, to lose to the Capitals, but at least the game was still competitive, as the Caps have indeed won 4 in a row going into this one. I've only lost 2 games all month. Doug Wilson assisted on both Hawks goals, which were scored by Gardner and Yaremchuk. But hey, great news! They actually avoided a second straight loss and are now in their biggest hot streak of January, winning 2 of 3. They down the Leafs once again 5-2 in Toronto on Hockey Night in Canada, and a clean sweep of the 3-star selections for the Hawks. Murray Bannerman is named first star with another stellar performance, 28 saves on 30 shots. Steve Lemmer gets a goal and a helper and a +2 and is named second star. And the third star goes to Troy Murray, who had 2 assists and helped kill 3 penalties in the first period. And this was a hard choice to make for the 3-star selections, as Ludzik and Lysiak had a goal and a helper each, while Gardner also had 2 assists. And hey, this is more like it. The Hawks once again finding... Yes, 2 more losses in a row to end the month, including the team they just beat, losing 6-2 to Toronto. Yes, the worst team in the league. And no, I'm not saying that as a joke. They literally were the worst team in the league at this time. They only had 9 wins going into this. A team that Chicago, again, had handled all season pretty damn well. Oy, Lysiak and Savard get the goals, but Tessier is ripped to shreds in the media for this one. And the team's lack of motivation is called out. Something has to give, but the only thing that seems to give is the Hawks giving up more goals. 6, that is, again, in a 6-3 loss to the Jets at home. Oy, Murray with 2 assists, Ludzik, Savard, and minor league call-up Tom McBurchie get the goals. Frazier returns and actually doesn't play well. Mercifully, this month comes to an end. Okay, look, I've covered teams on this channel who are a million times worse than this. That had months, a million times worse. Even very good teams have had months like this in the past. But just the lack of desire and the lack of true coaching and methods is hurting this team badly. The Hawks finished with a record of 5-9-0 in January, just playing bad. Now their record sits at 22 wins, 26 losses, and 3 ties. 47 points, not what I'd call stellar. And you probably guessed, the Blues have moved past them in first place, are now 4 points up on them. But good news! Everyone else in the division sucks a lot more than Chicago does at this point. They are 7 points up on third place in Minnesota, who have been one of the biggest disappointments in the NHL. And this month they averaged 3.6 goals per game, which, okay, if you have great goaltending, like Vezina level or Hall of Fame level in this era, that's fine. But even that might still be pushing it given the team. And it's down slightly from last month, and they've allowed 3.9 goals per game, almost 4. Yeah, that's not good as it continues to trend downward. The power play is still just barely mediocre, and their penalty kill, however, was better than last month. Well, for the third straight month, Denis Savard leads his team in scoring and has his best scoring month of the season so far with 6 goals, 14 assists for 20 points and was a good +4. He played all 14 games, showing a great deal of consistency along with his playmaking and having more epic performances. And hey, what a shock, Steve Larmer is in second in team scoring this month. A point a game as he led the team with 9 total goals, added 5 assists for 14 points, and was a +3. Larmer does provide the type of consistent scoring forward that any team could use in any given era, and is proving it this year as he along with Savard are now the only 2 players to make the top 3 so far every month. That's because third this month, with no Doug Wilson, Gardner, yes, Mr. Bill Gardner showed how great a presence he can be on all ends of the ice. In addition to working the penalty kill well, he notched 2 goals, 11 assists for 13 points and a +2. I'd say he's actually been the team's biggest surprise in the forward core. Troy Murray had a rough month, however, despite some really good performances. Tom Lysiak played well in many games, but was also awful in others. He was a team worst -10. And Olczyk was hit or miss this month. Rick Patterson actually looked very sharp early on, but dwindled kind of towards the end of the month. Yaremchuk played really well this month, as did Steve Ludzik. Well, he wasn't having a stellar year. It was unfortunate to see Bob McMillan's career end at the age of 32. The injury to Kurt Fraser didn't help things. However, some of the substitute players did okay. Tom McMurtry did well in the action he saw, as did Wayne Presley and Dan Frawley. However, Steve's brother Jeff Larmer was just simply there to fill a space and not much else. Injuries were definitely a huge factor of this overall forward core, however, it was still not able to get much going compared to last month. But Tessier just seemed completely lost on what to do some nights. Denis Savard's +4 actually led the team for ± in the month of January, continuing to show his impactful presence in his overall play. And while Doug Wilson may have slipped out of the top 3 for the first time this season, he still leads all defensemen in scoring for the 4th straight month, 3 goals, 9 assists, 12 points, and he was the best defenseman on the team this month, even though he wasn't quite as great as he was last month, but still very good. However, Ben Wilson was the most consistent he has been all season in January. Bergevin had a rough go of it, Dupont wasn't very good at all, O'Callaghan had some consistency issues too. Bob Murray went from a great December to a somewhat lousy January. He went from a +8 last month to a -4 this month. Keith Brown did miss 8 games of action, and that didn't help. He's actually playing pretty well before he got hurt. This is another step down for the Hawks. And now, of course, we get to the goalies. And Murray Bannerman had some amazing outings this month and stole the show in some games. He finished with a 4-4-0 record and a goals against average of 3.74, which is only slightly more than last month, but improved his save percentage to a really good .892. And remember, context of the era, folks, context of the era. However, the same can't be said for Warren Skorodensky, who had a bad month. He had a couple good performances, including his 1 victory. That's right, 1-5-0 record, a rough .873 save percentage, and a bad 4.08 goals against average. He didn't seize the chance of the momentum he built early in the year. Things look kind of bleak heading into February, but, well, let's see what happens. Things go from bad to worse to start February. 2 more losses in a row, both to the Blues in a home-and-home series, now falling 6 games below 500 and 8 points at a first. Hogs were embarrassed 5-1 in St. Louis. Bob Murray with the lone goal. Rough night for Bannerman in net. Keith Brown, who has returned, does not play well. The Hawks back home found themselves down 3-0 just 10 minutes in. And Dupont's first goal of the year and a marker by Dougie closed the gap to 3-2 after 1. The Blues went up 4-2, and the Hawks tied at 4-4 eventually, but lose 6-4. Gardner had a goal and an assist, while Lysiak and Bob Murray had 2 assists each. Hawks have now lost 4 straight overall and are not looking cohesive whatsoever. Steve Larmer, who during this streak notched 2 assists, was a -6. And while Bannerman has started the last 3 out of the 4 games in these losses, he has allowed 16 goals in 3 games. That's just above 5 a game, and a horrible .808 save percentage. General Manager Bob Pulford and the upper brass of the Chicago Blackhawks organization have finally had enough. Head coach Orval Tessier, after 3 seasons and a combined record of 99 wins, 93 losses, and 21 ties, is fired. It is believed he has no control over anything anymore, and the team is completely scattered around him in terms of their communication. Injuries are no longer an excuse at this point, as it has come to an end. Literally 2 seasons ago, this man was the NHL's Coach of the Year, but many feel that after his comments after the '83 conference finals, it was never truly the same with him and his players. He would never coach in the NHL again and would return to junior hockey, but did eventually get a job in the NHL as a scout for the Colorado Avalanche and even got himself a Stanley Cup ring in 2001. Bob Pulford will step back into the role. His record as Hawks coach in the past is 73, 79, and 36. Not great. But let's remember the last time he took over that interim role, they made it all the way to the conference final in 82. Can Pulley make a difference again? Well, they do break the losing streak, a tight 3-2 win over the Leafs. Both Bannerman and Larmer break back into the swing of things again. Murray is amazing in net, 34 stops on 36 shots. Larmer has a goal and assist and a +3, breaking out of his slump, and Savard also had a goal and a helper. Can they keep it up? Hey, indeed they do. A home-and-home with the Bruins is next. And the Hawks sweep both games. First, a thrilling 6-5 win in Beantown. It actually looked bad early, as Skorodensky got the start and was battling in 3 goals in just over 5 minutes. Larmer got them on the board, but they went down 4-1, and Fraser and Olczyk brought them within 1, but after Tuesday still trailed 4-3. Troy Murray scored 2 goals, 2:07 apart to give them a 5-4 lead. Boston tied up at 1:19 later. Bob Murray scored the game winner. Bannerman came in relief of Skorodensky for the win. Troy Murray scored 2 goals, Doug Wilson had 3 assists, Bob Murray had a goal and a helper each, Savard had 2 apples. The next game back at home, it was another tight one, but Lysiak gets the game winner in a 4-3 win, and Dan Frawley has his biggest game of the year with a goal, a helper, and a +2. Fraser also scored his 20th goal of the season, the first time he's reached that mark as a Blackhawk and 3rd time in his career. 3 straight wins for the Hawks, and they are now ready for a bit of a break. The All-Star break, that is. So on February 12, 1985, the 37th NHL All-Star Game takes place at the Olympic Saddledome in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. The Hawks only have one selection, that's defenseman Doug Wilson, who makes his 4th straight and overall appearance in the midseason showdown. Wilson went pointless as the Campbell Conference lost 6-4 to the Wales Conference. But can they resume the role they are on? Well, indeed they do. Another tight win, this time 5-4, against NHL All-Star Game MVP Mario Lemieux and the Pittsburgh Penguins. Dan Frawley continues to roll with 2 goals, while Fraser and Ludzik each have 2 helpers. The Hawks have won 4 games in a row, all by 1 goal no less. But everyone is back on the same page, it seems. It is the largest win streak of their season so far. But a home-and-home series with the Red Wings didn't result in any wins. First, it was a bad 7-4 loss. Bannerman had an awful game, letting in 5 goals the first period. He was pulled for Skorodensky. Larmer and Savard had a rough day. Lysiak and Ben Wilson had a goal and a helper each. The game did see the return of Al Secord, but he didn't play well. The Hawks at least got a tie back home, however, with a 4-4 draw. Bannerman left the game after the second period. Skorodensky finished it and actually played pretty well. Savard and Larmer bounced back from the last game. The former with 2 goals, the latter with 2 assists. For Savard, however, is his 4th straight 30-plus goal season. But they get right back in the W column with a 3-2 win over the Montreal Canadiens. Skorodensky steals the show here with an amazing 32-save performance. Fraser, Secord, and Doug Wilson score the goals. But then they lose to their division rivals, the Stars, 4-1. Olczyk with the goal, but Troy Murray, well, he played a rough outing. The game is notable because it was the NHL debut of goaltender Darren Payne, the little big warrior of the net, called up from Milwaukee of the IHL, but not the best debut, only stopping 18 of 22 shots. The game also did see the return of captain Daryl Sutter. But they end the month on another hot streak. They finally get the better of the Wings this month with a 3-2 triumph at home. Bannerman puts on a show, stopping 33 shots, while Savard had 2 assists in the win. There was a thrilling win against the Leafs, 4-3. Down 1-0 in the first, goals from Doug, Daryl, and Denny gave the Hawks a 3-1 lead after 1. But they couldn't build on it, and by the third, the Leafs tied it. They went to overtime when Doug Wilson scored the winner, the Hawks' first OT win of the season. Dougie Boy had 2 goals, while Savard was amazing once again, a goal, 2 helpers for 3 points. Secord had 2 assists, and what a game from Murray. Bannerman in net, 41 saves on 44 shots. Then it was a 6-3 win over the Dull Devils to end the month. That night did belong to Troy Murray. A goal, 2 assists, 3 points. His goal was the 20th of the season, the first time he's reached that mark. And Al Secord looking more like his old self with 2 goals. Larmer had a goal and a helper. Bannerman stopped 36 shots. Now things are not looking all that bleak in Chicago suddenly. Well, the Hawks had their best month of the season. They finished February with a record of 8 wins, 4 losses, and 1 ties, and since Pulford took over, are 8-2-1. The team is motivated, working harder. They look like a complete unit once again. It brings their record back to 500 even, with 30 wins, 30 losses, and 4 ties for 64 points. They still sit in second place, however, as the Blues also went on a hot streak and are 6 points back. But at least the Hawks are within striking distance still. But let's face it, with the rest of the division being so shitty, it's not like the Hawks are in any real danger to miss the playoffs. They literally sit 15 points ahead of third place Detroit. And they are still looking to win the division, however. They scored 3.5 goals per game, which, again, not really outstanding, but still good enough, and allowed 3.7, so not much changing here, really, with the trend of numbers this season. But that is a little less than last month. They did suffer some terrible one-sided losses, especially at the beginning of the month in Tessier's last games, and 7 of their 8 wins this month were by 1 goal, hence these numbers. But regardless, they're winning. That's what matters. Their power play, yeah, still not really growing. Their penalty kill, surprisingly, wasn't great this month either, but be that as it may, their 5-on-5 prowess was nearly perfect. Well, for the 4th straight month, Denis Savard leads the team in scoring with 5 goals, 11 assists for 16 points, and a +3. So he continues what is a spectacular season, producing at the high level he's expected to and beyond. He continues to be the number 1 man in the hearts of Hawks fans. And number 2 in scoring again is Steve Larmer. 5 goals, 6 assists for 11 points and a +2 despite a rough start to the month. He persevered and worked his butt off during the Hawks' hot streak when Pulford took over. Doug Wilson returns to the top 3, but is actually tied with Larmer for the second best scoring mark in the month, with 5 goals, 6 assists, 11 points, and a very good +5. The talk has stirred that he should be a Norris Trophy finalist with the year he is having, but how he has been consistently keeping his team moving from the blue line is also another factor of why he should be a candidate. Tom Lasiak showed massive improvement over last month. He actually had some good numbers, and he went improving from his horrendous -10 in January to a +1 in February. Fraser had some pretty good games and some pretty bad ones. Same can be said for Steve Ludzik. Troy Murray was on point for the most part, despite a couple rough outings, and now has surpassed his point total from the last 2 seasons combined. He has scored 51 points this season after amassing just 46 in his first 2 total. Patterson was solid in his role this month. Yaremchuk had some excellent games. Eddie Olczyk continues a strong rookie campaign. Despite the fact that the game he returned in wasn't that good, Al Secord actually boosted things as he's slowly starting to find his groove again in the nick of time at the end of the season heading into the postseason. Daryl Sutter's return should help the penalty kill again, hopefully. Dan Farrelly proved to be a really good hand. And Gardner, who was in the top 3 in scoring last month, sadly battled injuries this month. Statistically, they'll need just a little bit more, but at least they seem to be working together again since Tessier's dismissal, and that is huge. And yes, I know you're as shocked as I am that for the 5th straight month, Doug Wilson leads all defensemen in scoring with 11 points. But again, he proves to be their best blue liner, and the season he is having has many taking notice he's still among the best in the league. However, the big shock this month was indeed Jerry Dupont, who didn't play well at all in January, made a huge turnaround, went from being -5 last month to a team-leading +6 this month. He's had some excellent outings this year, and again has played a good role, stepping up his game in a huge way, which again is what this team needs. They need players motivated in the absence of others, as Keith Brown still missed 9 more games this month. Bob Murray showed improvement over last month, as did Jack O'Callahan, who played really good in many games. Mark Bergevin is still finding his footing, while Ben Wilson is just a slight bit of a step down this month. Be that as it may, overall this blue line core worked a bit better than last month, but they have time to ready the whole core by the postseason. And lastly, the goalies. Murray Banderman on many nights was looking like the Vezina finalist he was in the 82-83 season. He had a huge 7-3-0 record, improved his goals against average to 3.70, his second best monthly mark of the season, only 0.01 short of his actual best. His .878 save percentage, while not great, is still steady enough to give him the month that he had with some incredible show-stopping performance. Remember, 2 of his roughest losses came at the hands of those 2 games that he had to start the month. Warren Skordensky only made 4 appearances, but again was looking more like the guy he was earlier in the season, with a 1-0-1 record total, a very good 3.33 goals against average, and a monster .910 save percentage. Darren Pang got his first NHL start, which again was a loss, allowing 4 goals and an .818 save percentage. Either way, it looks like at least both of the main goaltenders here are on close wavelengths at last. Can the Hawks sustain this togetherness as we approach the final 16 games of the season, 13 in March, 3 in April, and can they catch the division title? Let's find out. They begin the month with a home-and-home series with the Blues once again. However, the wins come to an end, at least for now. But the Hawks are still unbeaten in 4. They did let this one slip away from them. They led 3-0 at one point and 4-2 in the third period. They had to settle for a 4-4 draw, but be that as it may, Daryl Sutter records his third career hat-trick and his first since December 12th, 1982. A huge game for the captain who has been through a lot with injuries, able to show he can still drive to the net and get the markers when he needs to. Savard also had 2 assists in this one. Bannerman faced 41 shots, stopping 37. But back home, the Hawks take the Blues down by a score of 5-2. Lysiak and O'Callahan each have a goal and an assist, while Sutter continues to roll with 2 apples. Bob Murray played great and was a +3 as the unbeaten streak hits 5. The Hawks now sit 4 points back of the Blues and make that unbeaten in 6 as the Hawks triumph over the North Stars 5-4 with the game deadlocked at 4. With the third period winding down, Doug gets the puck to Daryl, who perfectly sets up Denny for the game winner with 1:36 remaining. Savard also had an assist to give him a 2-point night. Ben Wilson had a goal and a helper as well, and Sutter is again rolling with 2 more assists, a huge cohesive effort from the Hawks up and down the roster. This really shows Pulford's methods can work really well, as during this 6-game streak, most of the team was firing on all cylinders. Denny Savard in this stretch had 2 goals, 8 assists for 10 points and a huge +9. Steve Larmer is averaging a point a game, showing that consistency once again, with 3 goals and 3 assists on this streak for 6 points, a big +7. But Daryl Sutter, wow, captain is leading by example, 4 goals, 5 assists for 9 points and a +6 in these 6 games. And defenseman Doug Wilson continues to make his case for the Norris Trophy, 3 goals, 4 assists for 7 points, and a massive +10 in this stretch. Meanwhile, goaltender Murray Bannerman has played every game of this streak and was a sensational with a 5-0-1 record, a 2.93 goals against average, and a great .911 save percentage. But alas, it comes to an end in pretty bad fashion, I might add. They are completely obliterated by Buffalo 7-2. The Murrays, Bob and Troy, had the goals, and the big guns were all disarmed as Savard and Larmer had a rough night, as did Secord and Bergevin. Bannerman allowed 7 goals on 23 shots in just 2 periods. And Junior League call-up Chris Clifford, who again his rights are owned by the Hawks, was in for injured Skorodensky, played the third period, and he stopped all 8 shots he faced in 20 minutes of the 24 NHL minutes he was seeing his entire career. But then it was a 3-2 loss at home against the Stars as the Hawks led a 2-1 goal lead in the third slip. Larmer, Savard, and Secord accounted for all the scoring. The former 2 with a goal and a helper each, and Secord assisting on both goals. Bannerman played better this go-round with 28 saves, with the Hawks lose back-to-back games the first time since Pulford took over as head coach. And they are now 8 points back of the Blues. But the Hawks have at least officially punched their playoff ticket. Then it was back and forth, up and down for the next 4 games as they would beat a struggling Rangers club 4-3. Kurt Fraser, who had not been really playing all that well starting this month, broke out of his slump with a huge performance. A goal and 2 helpers for 3 points and a +3. Savard, Sutter, and Ben Wilson each had a goal and a helper. Ben's was the overtime winner. Bannerman stopped 28 shots. Then they hosted the Islanders of New York next, but dropped a 4-3 decision this time. Larmer scored 2 goals. Denny Savard and Doug Wilson had 2 assists each. Hawks then went in Vancouver and doused the crappy Canucks with a 6-4 win. The big story here was Eddie Olchuk. The rookie had his biggest game yet this season, scoring a goal, adding 3 apples with 4 total points and a +4. Troy Murray was outstanding as well. He had 2 goals and a helper for 3 points and was also a +4. Ben Wilson had 3 assists, and Larmer had a goal and a helper each. But then, against the Oilers, Skorodensky returns to action, and it's a very bad night for him. He lets in all goals in a 6-4 loss. Larmer and Savard each had a goal and an assist. The Hawks are 4 points now out of first. But Skorodensky got the start against Calgary and was outstanding, stopping 33 of 34 shots in a 3-1 win. Troy Murray had a goal and an assist, and he helped subdue star center Kent Nilsson. But then the Hawks scored a huge victory, beating the first place overall Flyers 5-2 in a big upset. Bannerman, however, got hurt in the third period, and Skorodenski had to finish the game with it tied 2-2, and the Hawks exploded with 3 unanswered goals from Ludzik, Larmer, and Gardner. Larmer reached his career high in goals this season, scoring his 44th, passing his rookie mark of 43. Also, those 3 players each had an assist for a 2-point night. Then the Hawks had to fight to a tie with the Hot Jets 5-5. Larmer notched 2 goals and Savard had 2 assists. And that puts him at 101 points this season, making it his third 100-point season in the 5 years played. The Hawks were down 5-4 with 51 seconds to play when Sutter read the play and put the puck back to Bob Murray near the point and put it on goal for Tom Lasiak to tie it. But sadly, to end March, it was a loss to the Oilers. 5-point nights from Gretzky and Coffey, the latter getting a hat-trick, did the Hawks in a 7-3 final at home. In the loss, Savard, Bob Murray, and Doug Wilson each had a goal and assist, while Brown, DuPont, Sutter, and Lysiak did not play well at all. Skorodenski was much worse, allowing all 7 goals. The Oilers just have his number. However, the Hawks are now just 2 points back of the Blues for first place with 3 games left, while the Blues have 4. The Blues, however, extended their division lead to 4 points on April 2nd with a win over the Devils, but the very next day, those same Devils fell to the Blackhawks as they dominated them 5-0 and closed the gap back to 2. Skorodenski was superb in net, stopping all 34 shots for his second shutout of the season. Troy Murray and Eddie Olczyk had a goal and a helper each, while Frazier had 2 apples, and Bob Murray played a fantastic game. And there's some good news on the very next day. On April 4th, the Blues lose to the Rangers, meaning each team has 2 games left and the Hawks still sit back 2 points. Then, on April 6th, 1985, both teams readied for their games, both facing fellow division rivals. The Hawks went to visit the Detroit Red Wings. The Blues traveled to Minnesota to face the Stars. Chicago needs a win. If they lose their tie and the Blues win, that's it. The Blues clinch first. If the Hawks lose and the Blues lose, they still have one more chance to clinch in the final game of the season. Even if the Hawks tie and the Blues win, St. Louis still clinches the division. Well, here we go. And after 2 periods in both games, it's looking pretty darn good for our heroes. Chicago has a 2-1 lead over the Wings after 2 periods, with goals by Frazier and Secord. And look, the Stars are beating the Blues 3-1. Can this actually happen? But as the third period was winding down in both games, the Stars began to collapse and the Blues came back to take the lead. But the Hawks still had the lead with 1 minute to play. But as the Wings pulled the goalie for the extra attacker, they tie it with 11 seconds left as the Blues hang on to win 4-3. The Hawks must win in overtime or they lose their chance at the division. The Hawks try with all their might to put pressure on Corrado McAuliffe. But the time winds down, and it's a 2-2 tie is how it ends. The Hawks will have to settle for second place in the Norris Division this year. Either way, they still look like a much more formidable club now than they did in January. Skorodenski made 30 saves on 32 shots in this one. But the Chicago Blackhawks end the season strong with a 3-1 win over the New York Rangers at home. Finished the season overall very hot still, just losing 1 of their last 7. Keith Brown gets his first goal of the year. Ben Wilson scores 1, and Eddie Olczyk also gets 1, plus an assist for a 2-point night. What a month he is having. Troy Murray had 2 assists, and Murray Bannerman was great net with 33 saves. The Hawks have momentum going into the postseason, as this trying yet ultimately successful regular season comes to an end. As Chicago went 16-7-4 after the coaching change, and again only lost 2 games in a row, once under Pulford. Well, the Hawks have a strong month to end the season again, going 8-5-3 for the month of March and a few games in April. They finished second place in the Norris Division, as I mentioned. Their final overall record is 38 wins, 35 losses, and 7 ties for 83 points. A 15-point improvement over last season to boot, where they finished 4th in the Norris. Pulford got this team moving together and deserves a lot of credit for motivating them to push harder in the final stretch. And while they didn't win the division, the fans were enthusiastic again by the end of the season, seeing hope in this team. They finished just 3 points back of the Blues for first, and a big 17 points ahead of the Detroit Red Wings, who were in third, and that's the team they'll be facing in the playoffs. They averaged 3.8 goals per game this month, a big improvement in scoring and one of their better months in that regard. And on a dead even keel, they allowed just 3.4 goals per game. Really good for the goaltending and really good for the defense as well in this era. Their power play showed a little bit of improvement. Their penalty kill was actually their weakness this month, oddly enough. But be that as it may, they are springtime bound. And for the 5th straight month and overall this season, Denis Savard leads the team in scoring. With a huge 6 goals and 15 assists for 21 points and a big +7 in all 16 games, capping off what has been a superb year for the Hawks superstar. Steve Larmer for the 4th straight month comes in second in team scoring, with the team leading 10 goals, adding 8 assists for 18 points, also in 16 games and a +6, once again showing that work ethic he has become known for in Chi-Town. And we have a new appearance in the top 3, and maybe even some of you watching in this video were rooting for to get there, and that's Troy Murray, the amazing two-way presence whose constant hustle and determination made him very popular among Hawks fans this season. So he had 6 goals, 9 assists for 15 points, and was a very good +7 to end what was his career year. The return of Daryl Sutter certainly helped in many ways, especially early in March, but the best way it helped was his leadership. Al Secor played some great games to boot this month. Kurt Fraser started off the month pretty cold actually, but finished very strong, giving himself momentum. Gardner was good, Lutzik was decent, and rookie Eddie Olchuk had his best month of the season as his progression culminated with a huge final stretch. Lysiak was good, Patterson was solid, Yaramchuk was so-so. Overall, I'd have to say it was a good month for this forward core. Well, every month this season, Doug Wilson has finished tops in defenseman scoring, and usually dominating in that regard. In the final 16 games, he had 3 goals, 10 assists for 13 points, and despite a few rough outings, still finishes his tremendous season strongly. And while, again, it's not a shock that he took defensive scoring lead every month, but Ben Wilson was actually 2 points back this month, and finished with the team best +9 in March and April. Excellent production considering his inconsistency problems this year, and what a way to finish what was his best month of the season by far, and heading into the postseason, which can only help as he has a strong playoff presence. Also, Bob Murray ended his season very well, and Jerry Dupont continued to shine this month with another +6. Keith Brown did miss 6 more games during this stretch, but looked good when he was healthy. O'Callaghan and Bergevin were kind of lying in the weeds, but they also played some good games. Either way, this defense overall had one of their best months of the season, and hopefully can sustain it going forward, but Pulford will likely have to make some tweaks going forward, no doubt. And now to the goalies, who finished the year very strongly. Murray Bannerman had a 5-3-1 record, had his best monthly goals against average of the season with a solid 3.56 and an .885 save percentage. Had many spectacular performances, only a couple really bad ones, I'd say. But either way, a very good finish to the regular season. Lawrence Gorodensky had a good 3-2-2 record and a very good 3.30 goals against average and an excellent .898 save percentage and a shutout. He, like Bannerman, stood on his head some nights, but he proved he was up to the task once again. Chris Clifford, who was still playing junior hockey in Kingston, was called up as a temporary backup and played 20 minutes and didn't let in any goals. Murray and Warren for the last couple months have been quite cohesive in terms of their production and playing some tremendous hockey in net. Both looking very, very good heading into the postseason. But that is it for the month of March and April. Now it's time to look at the regular season's final numbers. As has been the common theme in this video, the Hawks' lack of goals became a problem as the 70s ended and the 80s began, and I mentioned how they improved drastically on that. But then they bombed last year in the 83-84 season, scoring just 277, finishing 19th in goals scored. That's literally the 3rd least total in the league. They improved this year, scoring 32 more goals, totaling 309. Still not enough for the top 10, but progress is progress as they move up to 11th most goals scored in the league. When it came to least goals allowed, last season they finished still decent in that regard, giving up the 9th least in the league with 311. And they finished 9th again this year and actually gave up 12 less goals, which is 299 netters given up this year. So steady in that regard. Their power play, however, still isn't overly strong, but they did go from 18th last year, which was the 4th worst, to 14th this season. Their penalty kill was solid last year, being 9th in the league, but this year it did slip a bit, but still remains somewhat respectable and 12th in the league. It's the only category they didn't improve on this season, despite some excellent penalty killers on the team. Well, I think you pretty much figured out by now who's going to be on the top 3 list of the top 3 scorers for the Chicago Blackhawks this season. Denis Savard had a spectacular year. 38 goals, which was a new career high, passing 37 from the prior season. and 67 assists for 105 points, his third best tally in 5 seasons. He finished a solid plus 16, played in 79 games, just missing 1. Since being drafted 3rd overall by the Hawks in 1980, he's been nothing short of brilliant in his play. He isn't just exciting and highly skilled, he has the heart and determination, and showed it once again this season. Savard, of course, made the top 3 every month, and the only time he didn't lead the team in scoring was actually the first month of October. Which brings us to the man who finished 2nd in team scoring this year, 3rd-year winger Steve Larmer. 1983 Calder Trophy winner as top rookie, had a big 80-45 season, his 3rd, a career best in team leading 46 goals. He added 40 assists for 86 points, just 4 shy of his career high from a rookie season. He finished a plus 17, showed his strength and durability. He feared nothing, took punishment, but didn't miss a single game once again this season, playing in all 80. Larmer, as I alluded to, is the only person other than Savard to finish any month in this season leading in scoring, doing so in October. After finishing 3rd in November, he finished the final 4 consecutive months in 2nd. Finishing 3rd is defenseman Doug Wilson, who's a true steering man for this team, leading rushes, often having them end up successful for the Hawks. And that shot, I tell you! He finished the season with 22 goals, the 2nd best mark of his career, adding 54 assists, proving to be a great setup man. That mark is a career best, totaling 76 points in 78 games. 2nd best in 8 seasons, and an excellent plus 24, which is actually a new career best. It showed that even in his 8th season, he could grow in his game. He emphasized what he meant to this club. He finished in the top 3 in scoring 4 out of the 6 months of the season, finishing as high as 2nd in November and 3rd 3 times. It was a huge breakout year for two-way centerman Troy Murray, who played every shift like it was his last and tried to make every minute of ice time he had count for something, whether it was killing a penalty, checking or covering a top forward, fighting for possession of the puck, or on an offensive rush. He had a career-best 66 points and became a big fan favorite, and he was one of the 2 other players to finish in the top 3 in monthly scoring outside of Savard, Larmer, and Wilson. The other was Bill Gardner. He actually proved to be a big surprise this season. Effective on the penalty kill, and yet his hard work and clean checking along the boards, he also added 51 points at career best. Rookie Eddie Olczyk progressed as the year went along. He notched 50 points in 70 games. He was a tiger up there on the ice this season and became quite popular among Hawks fans really quick. Kurt Fraser proved to be a formidable presence on the team this season. Many thought he'd be a trade bust after only playing 29 games last season, but he made it to 73 this year and scored 25 goals, also giving the team some extra toughness and aggression. Daryl Sutter, the team captain, once again dealt with injuries, many issues with his ankle, and even being bothered by his ribs. But he still showed that grittiness and determination and great leadership, playing just 49 games and still scoring 20 goals, reached the mark for the 5th straight season. Al Secor was still a nasty customer. He played 51 games, missing 29, and still only had 15 goals, as even when he was healthy earlier in the year, he didn't seem to produce much, but he did play some excellent games later in the season. Hopefully that'll pay off in the postseason. Tom Lacey had a bit of a rough season, but did come through for the team on several occasions. He had the 2nd worst total on the team of a minus 14. The only one worse was Bob McMillan, and even though he didn't really excel in Chicago, it was sad to see the way his career would come to an end. He just had 12 points in 36 games and was a minus 16. Rick Patterson actually had a great year in his role as a lower line forward, and greatly contributed to the team all season long and missed just 1 game. Steve Lutzik also played a factor in several games. He had a career best 31 points. Kenny Ramchick, while not perfect, had some nights where he truly stepped up big time for his club. Some of the substitute players, such as Dan Frawley, Tom McMurtry, and Wayne Presley, did well in the limited action they saw. And then there was Steve's brother, Jeff Larmer. Yeah. Well, anyway, this forward core did encounter injury issues, especially with Secord and Sutter. But if they can stay healthy in these playoffs, the forward core could be a dangerous one. Dennis Savard's 105 points was tied for 7th best in the league, along with Red Wings All-Star John Ogrodnik. This is Savard's return to the top 10 in points, having finished 6th in 82 and 3rd in 83, but he fell short of the top 10 last year, but he's back to the upper echelon this season. And on this list, he is included among 10 Hall of Famers of the 11 here. Wow. Savard also finished 7th in assists this year with 67. This is the 3rd time in the top 10 in that category as well, finishing 3rd in 82 and 2nd in 83. Once again, an incredible list here. 9 out of 10 are Hall of Famers. Wow, and Savard's playmaking skills just keep on shining. And for the first time in his career, Steve Larmer made the top 10 in total goals in the league, with his 46, tied for 10th, along with Kings All-Stars Bernie Nichols and future Hall of Famer Marcel Dionne. Larmer also made the top 10 in shooting percentage, ranking 8th in the league with a very good 22.0. But right there with him in 9th is his teammate and captain, Daryl Sutter, also with a 22.0. It would actually be the only time Larmer would make the top 10 in this category his entire career. But for Sutter, he actually cracked the top 10 back in the 81-82 season. Despite the Hawks' power play not being overly strong, Steve Larmer was the highlight of it. So much so, he was in a 13-way tie for 9th with 14 extra man markers. His first time in the top 10 in that category. And the Hawks' highlight of the penalty kill was indeed Troy Murray, whose 4 shorthanded goals were in a 6-way tie for 7th. And they both finished just outside of the top 10 in a 10-way tie for 11th with 6 game-winning goals. Well, now we move to the defense. And yes, the Hawks' best defenseman this year was far and away the man who's pretty much been their best blue liner for the better part of 8 seasons, Doug Wilson. As of course, yes, his 76 points led all defensemen on the team, but his plus 24 was also best on the team as well. Many felt that this season was actually better than his 81-82 season, feeling that there was a lot more depth in his game now. He took home the Norris Trophy as league's top defenseman that year, as you recall, as many felt he had more to offer at this point in his career, and that's hard to argue. And you can make the arguable point that he may have been the team's overall MVP this season. The second best defense on this core would actually have to be Bob Murray, and his 10th season proves to be a valued asset on this Chicago core and is well loved by fans. And he's been a long-time favorite of GM/coach Bob Pulford. It's easy to see why. He's a traditionalist who isn't afraid to take risks, however. He played in 80 games and was a plus 13, which is the second best mark of his career. This core was indeed marred by injuries, inconsistencies, and constant lineup changes, as sadly it was the unfortunate end of Dave Feamster's short career, as he was just hitting his stride it seemed. Keith Brown missed 24 games, was hit or miss in a given game, however he had a bad year in 84, but he was definitely a lot more reliable this season. Ben Wilson had some consistency problems, but really came alive at the end, and after missing 21 games last season, he played on all but 4 this year, and provided some truly nasty play, which sometimes is indeed necessary to swing momentum. Despite missing 14 games, Jack O'Callahan played very well, and is likely the most underrated part of this defense. Jerry Dupont, after being a part-timer over the course of the last 3 seasons, played in 55 this season, 55 games that is. In the final couple months, he was actually playing some fantastic hockey and added more toughness. Rookie Mark Bergevin did play a handful of solid games in the 60 he dressed for, but he'll still need more development as time goes on. Some games were better than others for this core, some months were better than others, and some would be great, awful, good, bad, decent, and all the rest. Pulley has some decisions to make, however, when it comes to the lower pairing. Doug Wilson's 76 points was 3rd best among defensemen scoring in the league, only behind 2 of the biggest star defensemen of that era, Ray Bourque in 2nd with 86, and Paul Coffey running away with the title with 121. Be that as it may, it's his 4th straight season finishing in the top 10 in this category and 5th overall. He first made the top 10 back in the 79-80 season, and he finished 2nd in 1982. And he is among 8 Hall of Famers here. That is insane. Now we move to the last line of defense, the goalies. Despite some troubles on and off, Murray Bannerman finished the season strong, again looking a lot more like the man he was 2 seasons before. He finished with an overall record of 27, 25, and 4, which is actually a career high for him in wins. His 3.84 goals against average may not be much to look at, and his 80-83 save percentage is his 3rd best in 5 seasons. But he was let up to dry on several occasions this year, but still put together some amazing performances. And that's a story his stats don't tell here, as with 80's goaltending, you ought to be careful to specify. Fans of Windy City still love the man with the ultra-cool mask. But rookie Warren Skorodensky proved to be a formidable backup. He was amazing early in the season, and yeah, he went through a bit of a tough time later on, but early in the season, many thought he might take Bannerman's job. But as I said, he fell into a funk, but got it together again by the end of the year. He finished with a solid record of 11-9-3. He had a very good 3.23 goals against average, and a sensational .903 save percentage, and 2 shutouts. Yeah, in this era, that might as well be 7 by today's standards. And he definitely made his presence felt among the team, putting on an amazing showcase on many nights. For the first 4 months of the season, it seemed one guy was noticeably better than the other, but by the final 2 months, it seems as though both were on a bit of an even keel. Darren Pang, as mentioned, made his NHL debut, but lost, allowing 4 goals and a bad .818 save percentage, while Chris Clifford played 20 minutes. Pang will actually go on to play 2 seasons in the future in the NHL, and as I kind of mentioned earlier, Clifford will play just slightly over 4 minutes more in about 4 years. Bannerman's 27 wins was actually 5th best in the league, and it's his 3rd straight season making the top 10, tying his 1983 mark of 5th best. Goaltending in this era was, well, very difficult to say the least, and Bannerman was indeed among the best on that list in a short period in the 80s. But this, again, this is how crazy this era is. Only 2 Hall of Famers on this list. Warren Skorodenski, however, made the top 10 in goals against average. Yes, you're reading this list right. Only 2 players were under 3. Yeah, and his 3.23 is 6th best in the league. By today's standards, that would not be good at all. However, he had the same total as Buffalo's Bob Sauvé, but Bob played more games. Either way, this is a very good accomplishment, and only 1 Hall of Famer in this list, and 1 should be Hall of Famer. And Skorodenski's amazing 9-3 save percentage was the best in the league. Yes, for those who don't believe me when I say save percentage in the high 800s was actually very good in this era, here is proof. He's slightly ahead of that year's Vezina winner, as a matter of fact, Pelle Lindbergh of the Flyers, who had a .899. Skoro becomes the first Blackhawk goalie to lead the league in the category since Tony Esposito back in the 71-72 season. This kid had quite the year. And now we move on to awards season. Sadly, no Blackhawks were finalists for any of the awards this year, but for the first time since 1982, Doug Wilson got votes for the Hart Trophy, actually coming in a respectable 7th place. Oddly enough, however, Savard got no votes for the Hart Trophy. That's just ridiculous. However, to the shock of many, Wilson barely missed out on being a finalist for the Norris Trophy as league's top defenseman, coming in 4th. It is, however, the 3rd time in his career getting votes. Steve Lemmer, for the first time in his career, got votes for the Lady Byng Trophy, which is awarded, of course, for excellence in sportsmanship, coming in 8th place. 2 Hawks players got votes for the Selke Trophy for best defensive forward in the league, as Troy Murray came in 10th in voting after coming in 28th last season, while Bill Gardner did register a singular vote, coming in tied for 25th. And spoiler, Murray would actually win this award the very next season. And lastly, Eddie Olczyk registered a single vote for the Calder Trophy as the Rookie of the Year, yet Skorodenski didn't get one at all. But the Hawks didn't walk away completely empty-handed. Doug Wilson is named a 2nd-team All-Star for the season. Despite missing out on being up for the Norris, at least that was, arguably the best season of his entire career, was being recognized among the All-Star voters here. Of course, he was a first-team All-Star back in 82, and look at this list here. Look at these All-Star team, 5 of 6 Hall of Famers. Wow. And indeed, that does it for part 1 of our look at the 1984-85 Chicago Blackhawks. A wacky yet kind of memorable season, to say the least. Stay tuned for part 2 as we get ready for playoff time. In the meantime, like and share the video, subscribe to the channel, and make suggestions for us for other teams to cover in the comments. And until next time,